Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 7th MATHER Economics Symposium on Subscriber Lifecycle Management. I'm Matt Lindsay, the president of MATHER Economics. Today we are pleased to have over close to 500 people registered for this 3-day virtual symposium. We have people from all over the world. So thank you all for spending time with us. I know people are busy. The objective of this symposium is for us to really share best practices from leading companies around the world in the industry in each phases of the subscriber lifecycle management process, and to provide really some great ideas for you to take back to your companies that you can apply and really make almost an immediate change in your business. MATHER is fortunate to work with publishers and other companies. We have 200 clients, and we really have the ability to see what are the kind of innovators doing in different parts of the process, the subscriber lifecycle management process. And we really are pleased to bring those companies together to really share their stories regarding subscribers, but just direct to consumer revenue strategies in general. We also have some speakers from other industries. We are very fortunate to have Major League Baseball from the sports industry. We have Time Magazine joining us today, as well as 6 Mile Bridge Vineyards from the wine industry. Just a quick word about MATHER. We are a data science solutions company. We are engaged with companies on an ongoing basis. We like to think of ourselves as partners, where we stay involved and help our company clients implement the recommendations or the advice that we give them. So why subscriber lifecycle management? So it's been an epic year for the media business, but really for the economy as a whole. And subscribers are now really the lifeblood of the digital business model for news media, as well as many other industries. Digital direct-to-consumer revenue is growing in just all over the place. And the subscriber business model has become, in many cases, the growth engine. So we have typically called these symposiums kind of reader revenue symposiums. This year, we broadened it to subscriber lifecycle management because we realize it's not always just about the reader revenue. It's about your product. It's about growing your audience, engaging your readers, acquiring subscribers, retaining them. So what we would like to do today is really have the speakers that we're very fortunate to have, and we're very grateful for their time. They're all very, very busy people, and we are always honored to have them here today. They'll share their strategies and success stories and case studies in these areas. But first, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Nikki Purcell. She was actually a speaker at our inaugural symposium back in 2014. So we're very pleased to have her back as our moderator. At the time, she was the Chief Digital Officer and SVP of the Dallas Morning News. She then moved to become the CEO of LifeBlue in Dallas, and we were collaborating with them there. And then now she is the president of Insight, which is a technology agency. They do some fantastic work creating award-winning designs, really focusing on great user experiences and developing sustainable code. So with that, I will turn it over to Nikki. Thank you so much, Nikki, for being our moderator.
Thank you, Matt, for having me. And in part, thank you so much for having such an innovative analytics organization that really makes this symposium possible. So ultimately, my job as moderator is really to help keep us on track today. So with that, what I'll do is just start with a little bit of housekeeping. So in thinking about how we'll go through this today, I just want to let you all know that our sessions will be recorded. And those are something that you can access later. When we have our speakers, we want to make sure that you stay engaged and you have the opportunity to ask them questions, because as Matt mentioned, they are industry experts, and certainly their presentations will cover a lot, but you might have some specific things for them. So just ask questions using the chat feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen there, and we'll keep track of those and make sure we get them in. If you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to Mather IT in that chat feature, and if you tag it that way, then we'll see it. But you can also email Shelly, and her email address is here, shelly@mathereconomics.com. I want to let you know that while you can take copious notes and keep along with us, that we will send you a link via email after the session so that you can have access to them. And any of the presentations that the speakers are willing to share today, we'll make sure you get access to those as well. Don't forget that you can watch this recording of the segments on Mather's YouTube channel, so look for that afterwards. But also, I really encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter and use the hashtag Mather Symposium if you want to comment on anything you hear today or any of the things that you find that you want to keep up with. So as many of you may know, Tony, he is the CEO of McClatchy, and I'm pleased to get to introduce him as our keynote. He is responsible, as his organization has 29 newspapers across 14 different states. It continues to be a successful audience-first strategy under his leadership. And what they've really done is managed to optimize their data collection and their analysis. And they've used that for their business, but also for their cultural and organizational transformation. So super excited to hear from him. And at this point, I'd love for you to welcome Tony Hunter.
Thank you, Nikki. What a pleasure to be here. I appreciate Matt. Thank you for the invite. And it's sort of a homecoming for me. I started my career in circulation. In fact, I started as a circulation auditor at the Audit Bureau of Circulations to date myself, now AAM. And back then I was looking to reduce circulation in my role as an auditor. And then I joined the Chicago Tribune, and I was in the circulation department and worked there for a number of years, was at the tip of the spear when we changed the name to audience development, for those of you that remember those days, which was really code for the advertising's most important, and pricing in circulation and consumers is secondary, back in the good old days with penny rates and half price offers. And then I moved into consumer marketing and sales, where I learned what I know about direct marketing. And so now back again to speak to this group as the CEO of McClatchy, I find myself where, as Matt has said, consumer revenue is the growth engine for the industry. And it's so important to our business model and sustainability of our media organization. So I'm honored to be here. I know about this much compared to most of you about this topic, but it is very exciting to represent our company and our employees at McClatchy, who are working so hard to build the new strategy at McClatchy. What I also want to say is today, I'm going to share a little bit of insight into where we're headed as an organization. I'll talk a little bit about where we're going to make bets. I believe making bets on people, making bets on ideas is really the role of the CEO. And I'll tell you where we're going to make our bets. And then at the end of the session, I'll talk to you about some work we're doing with Matt and his team as we adapt and evolve our consumer model and our pricing at McClatchy. I might as well cover sort of the elephant in the room. Having been out of the seat for a while and coming back to McClatchy, a lot of folks said, why McClatchy? And I just think this slide is the reason. Iconic company, really does great journalism and has a legacy of creating great journalism, has focused on essential local news and information during the pandemic. We're proud that there were no layoffs, no furloughs in the news division. We continued to create great content. I believe that was a critical component to success. And then in my years in the industry, I recognized how talented the folks at McClatchy were. And I was excited to join the industry in this role at this great company. And again, I'm honored to represent us today. The reason people ask me that is, clearly, this is my view of disruption. There are many definitions of disruption. It's overused. But to me, it's when things outside your organization wreak havoc on your business model. And we all know that's occurring as I speak. You think about digital advertising growth, but during the pandemic, what we found is the platforms are even getting more of a percentage of that growth in digital advertising, continuing to put pressure on our top lines. Traditional print revenues, both advertising and consumer, continue to be under significant pressure. And there's more options than ever digitally for news and information. All of that has caused more havoc on the business model of many of us. The way I view it, though, is we have a choice. And the choice is, how do we view that? Do we view it as a bad thing, or do we turn that into opportunities? And to me, you're looking for these opportunities and disruption where the circumstances and the opportunities that present themselves collide with your preparedness as an organization. And that's when we get breakthrough moments. And at McClatchy, we're really been focused on getting prepared. And a big part of that preparation is a plan. I've been criticized in the past for having simple plans, but I believe simplification drives focus, it drives people's passion, and everyone understands how they can play a role. What you have here is a very simple one-page outline of a business plan. The solutions are complicated. The sophistication behind the solutions is high. But at the end of the day, I think you can simplify. What do we aspire to be? We aspire to have a sustainable, digitally driven business model where we're focused on customers at the core of that business model. Our mission hasn't changed for probably 100 years. We continue to provide essential news and information to the readers in our local markets and constantly evolve that information to meet their needs. So that has been a cornerstone at McClatchy. How we do it needs to continually improve and keep pace with the marketplace, but that is a core ingredient of our success. The core competency section of this plan, I think in a lot of ways, our industry, we've chased a lot of shiny objects in the past. We go to the next idea, but I believe you should really double down on your core competencies, especially those core competencies that differentiate you in the marketplace. And I believe our industry has many. At McClatchy, we understand the value of content and to make sure it's essential and that people in our communities have to visit us, have to consume our content. We also know our audiences are not only engaged in our content every day, multiple times a day digitally, but they're highly valuable, and they're highly valuable to clients. We have distribution channels in all of our markets. We have strong local media brands, iconic brands, Kansas City Star, Miami Herald, Charlotte Observer, to name a few. And last but not least, we have people that really care. They're passionate and they're talented. And rather than running from what we do and running from being a publishing company, at McClatchy, we're embracing our core competencies. We're going to double down on those core competencies. Because in many cases, what we've learned, digital media companies that have started from scratch have been unable to sustain the business because they don't have these core competencies. So we're doubling down. And last, oversimplifying, we have 3 key objectives. We are not harvesting print. In fact, we want to maximize and optimize our print revenues in the near term. We also believe there's an opportunity to strategically manage the transition of both print advertisers and print consumers to our digital products, and to do that in a profitable way. And last but not least, of course, everyone is doing, is we need to drive digital only revenue. We're focused on profitable digital revenue and making sure that we get paid for those valuable audiences in those channels where we reach them. So this is our preparedness. This was our way of getting focused and prepared for what is an extreme battle to get to that sustainability point. This too is not rocket science. Nothing unique, probably many organizations have this, but what we really didn't have a North Star. We weren't aligning all our divisions with a single set of goals and everyone understanding where we're headed. We have done that in the last 6 to 7 months. We are continuing to focus on the top line like many of you. We believe we have a lot of opportunity in using technology to drive information and transformation of the organization. AI, machine learning, technology-enabled solutions that we need to catch up with the rest of the world and the rest of the sectors around us. At McClatchy, we're doubling down on local. It's our unique advantage, and we need to win in every one of our 29 markets. You'll hear later from me about our creating value for consumers, but again, at the core, we need to meet their needs and exceed their needs so that our direct marketing team can extract the maximum value possible and grow our consumer revenue. And for those of you that have heard me speak and or work with me, you know I think it all starts with culture and with people. And at McClatchy, we're creating a culture that initiates and supports change and also embraces diversity of opinion, diversity of perspective, diversity by gender, diversity by color, and also inclusion. In many cases, the answers are right within our organization. We just need to ask and listen. And we're building this at McClatchy so that we can turn our talk into action. I think the other thing we can improve in our company is our talk to action ratio. I'd like to see more action and less talk. And we're working on that at McClatchy. However, we all know we're never done. In this current environment and for the next decade, the world will never be as slow as it is today. So we have constantly have to innovate and continue to create new ideas. At McClatchy, we simplify it. Innovation has many definitions, but it's getting better every single day at everything we do. And that includes every employee in our company. Everyone can innovate. And if everyone contributes, those ideas can stack up to big money and big value for the organization. We also believe it's about creating an agile organization. I made this up, no surprise. People know I make up stuff all the time, but I made up org agility. It's just saying we need to be able to implement new things in our industry fast. And importantly, we need to pivot frequently. I think sometimes we double down and we stay too long with a solution. Once we see any waning of results or a change in the market, organizations that have these characteristics of org agility tend to survive disruption. And in many cases, they thrive during disruption. Using hindsight, which is always 20/20, I believe there are a few ingredients and characteristics that you should build into your organization, whether you run a division, a small department, the company, a conglomerate, wherever you sit. I think the things that allow for an agile organization and characteristics like these prepare you for any disruption that you're going to run into. First, people need to know and embrace where you're headed, your vision, and your mission. In our sector, we have the advantage that almost everyone that works in our companies has a strong connection to the mission. And it's up to leadership to make sure we don't screw that up. And we capitalize on that. People really believe in our mission in publishing. We need to be faster. No matter how fast we are today, it's not fast enough. And the world is changing, and the organization needs to be able to change with the marketplace. Leadership. All you need is some weak links in leadership, and you lose engagement of employees, and your employees don't do their best work. And in disruptive circumstances like we are operating, it is a must that your leaders within the organization get the best work out of everyone in the company. Highly engaged employees create way more value. And therefore, focusing on leadership is important at McClatchy, and I believe in any company. The most boring of these is alignment and accountability. This is the hard work. It's not glamorous, but making sure that all goals are cascaded from the top to the lower levels in the organization, and that everyone knows how they can contribute and are held accountable for those specific goals that are set for them. Again, not a sexy topic. It's hard work, but if you do that, you get synergistic value by everyone being rowing in the same direction and also being held accountable. And last, I love to win, but I hate to lose more than I love to win. And I believe you need to be competitive. People need to come to work wanting to win. At McClatchy, we're talking about expecting to win. Coming to work expecting we're going to win. And when we don't, learning from that and getting back after it the next day. And again, constantly renewing efforts to be better today than we were yesterday, and to push the envelope on new ideas and not be afraid to fail. Just fail fast and fail forward. And so we're working hard to create this agile organization, because at the end of the day, this will create a sustainable organization regardless of the headwinds and the disruption that we will encounter. I want to talk a little bit about transformation. I know it's overused, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, because I do believe we are in a major transformation of the business model at McClatchy. And I'm starting with this box, and I'm going to leave it up there for a while, because we are doubling down on local reporting, local news and information. And we believe it is the most important competitive advantage that we hold. And we should not only just hold on to it, we should grow it. And we should make investments in our local content so that we can continue to drive consumer revenue. That is a big bet we're making at McClatchy. Kristen Roberts, who runs our news division, is a terrific leader, and I'm doubling down on her too. I'm going to skip over distribution channels, but if you think about it, we reach people through a number of channels, analog and digital, and that is a competitive advantage. But I'm going to leave that for now and focus on two other bolded items here. We have to, at the core of our plan is the growth in audience and the engagement levels of that audience. In a world where everything's moving to digital, in a world where clients are moving to digital, in a world where you want to grow consumer revenue, you have to find a way to grow audience. And we are engaging in efforts right now to figure out new verticals, new enhancements to our product set, so that we can continue to grow audience and continue to get stickiness with those customers we have today, so that if you go to the grow consumer revenue side of the slide, we can maximize the amount people are willing to pay. And that is the growth engine for our company in the future, and I believe all of yours. I'm not forgetting B2B. We are looking at our advertising models. We know it needs to be transformed, and we need to figure out a way to transform with the marketplace. But at its core, we're focused on consumer. And last, again, all of us are cutting costs. All of us are finding ways to be more efficient. We're re-engineering our cost structure at McClatchy, allocating resources more towards news, more towards consumer, and less toward declining revenue streams. We're outsourcing functions that are not core to us, and we're looking for automation techniques that can help us drive efficiency. But we're also investing a lot of time in culture. We're proud of our team. We've made changes, but we've mostly taken people and putting them in new chairs and allowing them to thrive. And we've had others join our team. But we're focused on all of these because we think in the end, all of these things will be important. But with respect to this conference, I believe it starts with the product. We talk a lot of pricing, but in the 4 Ps, if you don't have a great product, it doesn't matter how good you are at direct marketing. You have to have a great product. And so we're focusing on that right now at McClatchy. We'll never be done is the next slide. I think the next slide that, if I could get the clicker, back to where I want it. We're never done, okay? We all know that we'll never be done because it's a constant adapt, evolve, and reinvent process. But today, I really wanted to focus this on the work we do with Mather and the work we do in our direct marketing and subscription efforts, because I believe the marketplace is changing rapidly, as I said earlier, but also our business objectives continue to evolve and need to be reinvented. And so we have taken a step back, looked at our efforts on consumer revenue, and we're working on a number of new things with Matt and his team to position us to be able to win in today's marketplace. I want to share those with you now. So like anything, you all know, you set an objective, you start testing, you measure those results, and then you double down. Or in Jim Collins' Great by Choice, he says, fire bullets, and when you hit the target, load up the cannonball. And we are applying that science and that analytical framework in working with Matt and the team. Back to my objectives, if you recall, the first one was to maximize and optimize print revenues. We, in the past, I know none of you have done this, but in the past, I have done it. You get an analytical tool, you get a number of options, and you go right to the highest price. And you drive that print customer pricing as high as possible because you have confidence they're going to hang in there with you. Well, we've done that in the past, and we've seen some results that actually are negative from a profit standpoint. So we asked Matt and his team to adjust their algorithms and to look at customers in print in a different light, create a different price increase model for us that isn't always going to the top price. And what we found is that if we take that into account and run it in a way where we're optimizing, that we can get a yield on renewals by 5%. But the key is the revert rate versus what we were doing before is going down 7%. And if we're looking to optimize print revenues with consumers, we're trying to find these targeted strategic increases where we can keep as many as possible, simplified, increase their price, but not lose them by getting too aggressive. We're now going to roll that out across markets. We tested it in several markets, and then we're going to test different groups of customers. This is just what I would say an adaptive evolving of the Mather model we've used for years. The second one is really in progress. It is in its infancy, but it's taking print customers and trying to find an active way to manage them from print to digital based on their behavior, their consumption patterns on digital, and by dividing them into customer segments, and in effect, finding ways to encourage them to move to a digital product at a price that's a discount to print, but not heavily discounted, and drive profit. And this is in its infancy, but we believe there's a way to watch folks' behavior. When they reach a certain level of behavior, give them an enticing offer to go to digital, and in effect, encourage them to move from print versus them stopping the print subscription. And basically we have to start the relationship over again. Again, early in our testing, but we're excited about this opportunity. And last, you're all doing this. We did not have a digital subscription pricing model, and we've been working with Mather to build one. And so we've done price tests anywhere between 25% increases and 135%. And we're really attempting to build a new model. And what we found in our first test with tenured digital subs is that we could increase price 79% and only have a 4.6% incremental subscriber stop level over people with no increase. Let me say that again, 79% and only a 4.6% incremental stop ratio. All of you are probably drooling like me. How fast can we roll that out was what happened. And again, it just shows the price sensitivity is extremely low. for these folks that have been on the digital offering. Now we're going to take that model, we're going to start applying it more in a targeted way across different subscribers with different tenure, and we're going to lift it and bring it over to acquisition and build the acquisition price testing model as well. So these are just 3 things we are focused on and that we're working with Matt and the team. Thought it might be helpful to share since this is a symposium around this topic, but we're really excited about the results we're seeing, and we're also looking forward to building even better models in the future. So with that, I would say thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to represent our company. We're very excited at McClatchy. We understand the challenge, but we are leaning in heavily on the consumer model because we believe that's a sustainable model that'll carry us forward for decades. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Tony. Wow, that was chock full of information. So I appreciate that. In fact, we have a couple questions for you. And just before I toss your first one to you, in case you want to get a drink of water or something, I just want to let everyone who's joined as we started know that you can ask questions of Tony and all of our speakers by putting it in the chat window below on Zoom. And that we'll also be recording these sessions. So you can get links to those afterwards. We're going to send them out via email because I know that came up. So I just wanted to let you know that those 2 sort of housekeeping things are there. So, all right, Tony, first of all, thanks for bringing the energy. First speaker out of the gate for our symposium. It was awesome. One of the questions that I had that actually came up from one of our attendees as well is the one I'm going to throw you first. Scott Keller asks, when you talked about increasing the talk to action ratio, and I loved it too, I wrote it down. His question is, how can you quantify that within McClatchy?
Great question, Scott and Nikki. I get it a lot. This one to me is intuitive. You can measure it, but you have to measure it by observing. Meaning, what I'm trying to get to is when we're in a meeting and we're talking about something and people are leaning in, I don't want to talk about it in another meeting. I want to say who's taking this one and going. And then how long does it take between the time we decide to do something and implement it? And so I believe shortening the cycle time on ideas is one way to measure it. Second is when people begin to start acting on their own, meaning there aren't big meetings to talk about things. People are just, they know where we're headed and they start to act upon that. And so it is not a metric. It's another one of these directional things. But if you're in tune with your organization's agility and the level of change that's occurring, what you should be able to see is that things just get done in shorter cycle times. For instance, we have made a number of major changes in 7 months. And so when I look at that, I say, that's fast. And when I ask people that were at McClatchy when I arrived, they say, that's really fast. So a lot of it as a leader is you get an intuitive sense of how things are going, but you can measure cycle time between the idea and implementation. And that I think is a key. And it normally starts at the top of the organization with the senior leaders and getting buy-in and creating that cultural expectation as well.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. I think we'll all start looking at how we measure that going forward. So Tony, no surprise, you end with a slide that talks about a 79% increase in pricing with only a 4.6% stop rate. And of course, not only do we have other people drooling, they want to know more. So one of the questions that's come in, I'm sure predicated by that, is around some of the information that you are willing to share on your digital subs that you might be modeling for price increases. The question is really around what's the tenure of those digital subs? Is there a point in time in which you need to wait, that they have been engaged enough to begin to address that pricing model?
So first of all, when you do a presentation like this and you're not a direct marketing expert, you high it up, right? So there you have it. I'm letting out the curtain, pulling the curtain back. Let me just say a few things that I have learned about direct marketing. Number one, pricing, and this is a quote from Lakshman Krishnamurthy, who runs marketing at Kellogg at Northwestern. Pricing is an empirical issue, meaning don't do anything without data and testing in the marketplace. So let me just start there. This is based on testing our subscribers. They are tenured over a year. Many of them haven't seen a price increase in a year. So the cohorts are important here. So I gave you an average, but we took high tenure, folks that hadn't been given an increase in a while, let's call that a year. And what we wanted to test was, how sticky are our products? Do they like it? Are they engaged? Are they satisfied? And so we decided to go high with pricing. And the range, as I said, was up to 135%. And what we found is the sweet spot, the optimum level, was around 79%. But we will now begin to do that in a much more targeted way based on people's tenure, their pricing history. But I think what we've learned is we have been too passive and we've been too conservative on our digital. I don't know why that is in our industry, right? I think it's because there's no paper and ink, there's no distribution charges, but our digital products are terrific. And so to me, let's lean into that. Let's press on price. And for those people that are really using it, I believe the elasticity, the low price elasticity and sensitivity that we found, you all will find as well. So maybe not a specific answer, but I wouldn't give a general answer in anything to do with direct marketing. Test, measure, tweak, adapt, and target. Those are the things that I think about when I think about consumer pricing.
Thank you. And just a clarifying point to that. So when we talk about those numbers, that's been on the print side primarily, and then you're looking at how you're going to apply this to digital?
No, this was digital. This was a digital only test.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think one of the questions
this is digital, and we did not have that, Nikki. Yeah. We didn't have the same rigorous model around digital, which is why you were conservative, right? If you don't have data, you're going to take it little by little. So working with Matt and his team, we've been able to create a new model around digital. And that's the breakthrough for us, is that now we have that flywheel that we can use moving forward. And frankly, we believe it's going to help us drive revenue higher.
Excellent. So just to clarify, because I think this is one of the questions that came in as well, is have you guys applied any type of pricing analysis and increases to print as well? And is there a difference that you can share on what that sweet spot is for print?
Yeah, I don't have a sweet spot on print, but if I go back to the page with the test, if I can get there, we'll see if I can. If you go to that first line, again, what we were doing is we were setting the objective, and the objective wasn't necessarily to optimize our print revenues. And so we were getting aggressive price increases, aggressive models. And when we would get out to market, we were finding that the stop rate was higher than we anticipated. And so I think we've just fine-tuned that model and set objectives that are more around holding people that are at the upper price range. And going back to what I used to call stealth price increases, I'm dating myself, we call them stealth, right? Just small incremental increases to customers that are paying at a high rate. And that is a change for us. We were aggressive on print customers. And I think we've reached a place now where we need to reset the model. So that's more of a tweaking of our existing model. And basically that's the input we provided to Mather's team. And they are helping us build these algorithms so that we can get a lot more precise with print customers. So we've had that all along, Nikki. This is just more of an enhancement of the model.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, no, I love the metaphor that you described for us, which was shoot the bullets, and when you hit the target, fire up the cannon. Like, I don't think I'll forget that either. So I appreciate that metaphor. It makes sense. And you guys have definitely found a way to target and to be effective at it. So, just to kind of circle back to digital for a moment, which is, again, where so much of the future is, one of the questions that's come in is, what kind of things you guys are doing in terms of retention? So you obviously will have some stop when you get to a price increase, but what are the retention tactics that you're using for some of these digital subs?
Well, I think like many, we're not unique in this. I think we all have learned this notion of what's the right balance of emailing customers, getting them newsletters, finding ways to engage them. We have a team that is, steeped in that science. I mean, that is a science and an art, but much like everyone, I think it's about driving them to content that they appear to be interested in, making sure we are the essential local news source, breaking news. I mean, the playbook really is the same for all of us. I think it's just constantly learning and adapting that is something we're really focused on. Measuring our activities, understanding if we do 3 things to a customer, what's the impact versus 4. And I think it goes back to this science of analyzing data, testing. That is the mantra that we are using at McClatchy. Grant and his team, Jessica, others in that department are focused on testing. We're experimenting. And I think that's the answer. The answer lies in the experimentation and the testing, not in the tactics. The tactics, we all know what the tactics are. It's which ones are you going to use and when, and how do they apply together? That's the science that we're working on today. So no earth-breaking, groundbreaking solutions from McClatchy. It's more the approach and the rigor and the work that we're doing that will lead to those, I believe.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So one last question for you as we have a little bit more time that I think is really important for you to help us understand, Tony, particularly in the role that you're in McClatchy, which when you kicked off today, one of the things that you mentioned is how important it is for leadership to be able to keep a pulse on what's happening outside of the organization, in addition to inside. And that obviously starts at the top as well. And I was just wondering if there's any sort of best practices or advice you can give as people start to get really with data analytics, quite frankly, in the weeds, and they start to look at tweaking dials just by, half percentages and such. How do you keep that big picture perspective in check as well to make sure that something that's an outside force doesn't come in and sort of blindside you?
I'm going to go back. Sorry about this build slide. I'm going to go back to this slide.
Yep.
Again, let's talk about leadership. This is a great time, my favorite topic. If you want to be a great leader, you want to be great at your field, you must be current and you must be relevant. You need to be looking at other industries and identifying what's working there and might be adapted to come into your organization. I love to look at other sectors, and many of them are ahead of us, or finding things they're doing that could apply in our industry. Emerging trends that are going to impact your business, and being ahead of those so you can start to adapt and evolve the organization in advance. My point is, you need to be a student of the marketplace and other sectors, because the things you find there, in many cases, can be applicable to publishing. And we need to get to those quickly, get them in place in our organizations. But as a leader, I think that's the key. You got to listen. You got to listen to the marketplace. You got to listen to things going on in your sector. You got to listen to your employees. You have to listen to your suppliers. You got to listen to your customers in the markets. And if you get your head wrapped around all of those things and spend time thinking, I'll say this: spend some time thinking. Yeah. And look at your calendar, and I bet you don't have a lot of think time in it. Guilty as charged for many years. Full of things to do, plenty of tactical work, but you miss the forest for the trees. And so find time to invest in your own knowledge, your own capabilities, and also give yourself some time to think. And try to think big, because you can always go small. The challenge is going big. So that's how I would answer that, Nikki, is I think it's never ending. You're never done. And if you want to stay current and relevant, you need to go through the cycle of adapting, evolving, and reinventing. If you run a division, you need to use this. This to me is the easiest way to explain how to stay current and relevant. And it's all about being a learner as well. So that's the best I could do on that question. Everybody sits in a different place. That's why it's hard to give advice. But I think staying current and relevant in whatever field you're in is the starting point.
Well, thank you for that. And leadership advice from one of the best. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. I think it's a fantastic way for us to wrap up today. We could go on, Tony. There's so many questions that have come in, but I just want to thank you for being here today and being as open and transparent and sharing with us today, because it's been awesome. So thanks so much for your time. And you can see on the screen now is Tony's contact information. Definitely connect with him if you get the chance, or follow him on Twitter. And we appreciate it. Thank you, Tony.
Well, thank you, Nikki. My pleasure. I hope it was helpful. And again, thank you, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity to represent our great company and our great employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, up next, I get the opportunity to introduce you to our next speaker, which is Pete Doucette, who is the Chief Revenue Officer of the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's also the former Chief Consumer Revenue Officer of the Boston Globe. I've known Pete for a number of years, so I'm excited about this one. He is going to get to share with us a really fantastic topic, one that I'm sure is on your mind, talking specifically about the transformative data issues that are facing media companies today. What's going to happen with first-party cookies and how this works. So the rise of first-party data and the fall potentially of third-party data usage in media companies. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to Pete Doucette.
Well, thanks for the intro, Nikki. It's great to see you again. Thank you, Matt and the Mather team. Super excited to be back at another symposium. It's one of the, Tony mentioned a little bit about taking a step back and creating time to think. I like to think these symposiums are one of those examples of this. So excited to be here. Tony's a tough person to follow. I got to be honest. He's a mentor and a friend, but he sets the bar high when it comes to speaking at things like this. One of the themes that I heard Tony talk about is what I'm going to kind of get into today. About big bets, taking big bets, because I'm a huge believer in that, and I think that is something that our industry probably doesn't do enough of. Nikki mentioned I spent some time at the Boston Globe. I was fortunate to play some big bets there that I think put the Globe on a good path to digital transformation and sustainability. And then I spent a little time doing some management consulting. Where you get to think about what my big bets might be, but you don't really get to execute on them. And now jumping back in, I'm in Philly with the Inquirer team. I'm overseeing both the consumer and the B2B business. Get to work on my John for my Philly friends and really try and make a difference there. And so we're really excited to talk about this. And so in the context of first-party data and thinking about data strategically is what I want to talk about today. So that's kind of the big bet that I'm going to lead the discussion on, and we'd love to get your questions throughout. I'll give a little context of the industry. I'll go through the Inquirer a little bit as a case study. I've only been there a few months. I'm not saying we've got it all figured out, but there's been a lot of good work by the team there, and we're really thinking about the future and what that means in terms of data strategy and why is it worth pursuing? What's the payoff? And then we'll end with some questions and answers, hopefully some answers. So jumping in on the industry background. So breaking out my consulting hat again. I think it's important to take stock kind of where the industry is, and I think we all know this, but I don't think you can mention it enough how much the revenue mix is changing with our businesses. So the chart on the left is the revenue mix for the U.S. newspaper industry from Q1 of last year, so pre-pandemic. And you can see the relative distributions. And then the chart on the right is what is the forecast of the revenue mix for the end of this year for the fourth quarter of 2021. And this was done by FTI Consulting last year. And so the important thing, or the thing that I want to stress really, is the changing mix. And clearly there's contraction, there's revenue contraction. I think we all know, like, the print ad market is very disrupted. But when you look forward to the fourth quarter of this year, the expected revenue distribution, what you see is digital advertising and digital subscriptions both at 14%. So they're, for the industry, the projection is they're going to be relatively the same size. That's a good thing. Digital subscriptions are on the growth path. Digital advertising revenue had a significant head start. So it's a good thing that they're going to be kind of on par. I think the challenging thing, and the point I want to make, is it's still relatively small. And I think Tony kind of hit the point about really focusing and doubling down on getting to digital. And so that's kind of the backdrop and the context that I'm trying to bring to this conversation. So really thinking about, what is that mix? So looking very specifically at digital ad revenue and digital subscription revenue, and what can we do from a data perspective to kind of think about and supercharge that. And so we talk about kind of the industry headwinds. We see, the industry revenue mix, and that's kind of the macro changes. In addition to that, there's what I call market headwinds. So there's things happening in the marketplace. I think they're very topical today. We know that there are browser changes and implications of changes with Chrome, and a potential elimination of third-party cookies, which are expected to go away. Safari clearly has some limitations in the ability to track users in a third-party basis. Apple within their app platform makes it difficult to kind of track from an advertiser perspective. There's data privacy and legislation, GDPR in Europe a couple of years ago, and California. So there's changes that's kind of being driven from the technology and platform and browser side. And then clearly these changes have implications, because you're not going to be able to track users in a consistent and meaningful way. And at some level, there are some estimates that say 40% of third-party cookies are dead, and then they're not even valuable today. And I think this is a trend that many of us have seen, that programmatic advertising CPMs are declining. So again, we've got the revenue mix changes, we got the the kind of the technology and platform changes that are leading it. And then if you think about where are publishers in terms of their readiness from a data perspective, and so are they ready to embrace this digital future? We all know we need digital revenue. Are we in a position to take advantage of it, really? And this is an assessment of the Inquirer a couple years ago. It was done by Deloitte Consulting, and it's called like data maturity, and it looks at both the Inquirer, where the team kind of assess themselves on these different attributes, as well as the industry at large. And what I would say at a macro level, at the highest level, we'd say the Inquirer and the industry is not ready. If you think about the maturity curve from nascent to developing to mature, the companies are really good at it, and then leading, neither the Inquirer nor the industry is there. So part of our challenges is we haven't created kind of the foundations and the infrastructure, and probably steal some from Tony, is like the strategy to execute and take advantage of the data that's available to us. So thinking about it from a reader engagement perspective, or how do we harness and nurture those relationships, or how do we use it from a B2B perspective to create good solutions for our clients and advertisers. We're just not there. So we've got a business model challenge. We've got We've got headwinds with the market and legislation and browsers, and internally we're not all the way there. So what do we do about that, and how do we think about that? So we're going to jump in a little bit in terms of the Inquirer, and talk a little bit about what the data looks like, and what is kind of driving. So this is a couple of charts, and I'm just trying to visualize how much third-party data we have on the left side. As you can see, that large circle, so that's representative of our third-party data that we use to fuel our digital ad business. And then in the center is the relative size of our digital advertising revenue. And so the point and the takeaway there is, we've got tremendous amounts of third-party data that's yielding a relatively small amount of digital ad revenue. And then on the right side, and then on the audience side, is kind of first-party data that we are using to drive our digital subscription business. So it's much smaller amount of data, but it actually drives a slightly higher amount of digital revenue on the consumer side. And the point and the question I'm trying to tee up is, like, does this make sense? Is it interesting? Does it make sense that we got all this data over here and we're yielding this amount of revenue, or we get this, a small amount of first-party data and we're yielding a higher amount of revenue? So does that make sense? So that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. And then on top of that, if you look at our audience, I thought this is a really interesting look. Is this box, or this tree diagram, represents our digital audience in terms of people that we know things about, know their email, know some information, know some first-party data about, are the known users on the right, this little sliver of users, versus on the left, where most 99% of our users are anonymous. And so this is the game, this is the table as it's set today. And I think we're at a point where we need to decide, does this make sense, or what are we going to do to change it? And so to that point, we talked a little bit about, we've got this small amount of known users. It's just a tiny fraction. The people are reading our content. We create great content about Philadelphia and the region every day, but we know very few about, we don't know a lot about the people who are actually reading that content. So what do you do about that? How do you get to know more about them? You can think about things. These are some of the kind of the strategies that we're pursuing around that. First is around registration. Get people to identify, get a value exchange of information for access to content. So we're focusing on registering to know more about users. And then the next point is progressive profiling. So it's hard to get all the information you want right away from a user. So what you really want to do is get a little bit, or the minimum amount up front, to get kind of the email, and then you start to build over time. You start to build the profile, collect more data, and continue to build a robust database, a first-party database. And that's really powered by like a customer data platform. So this allows you to bring it all together, to organize and bring it all into one place. And that's a really important thing. So thinking about how to grow known users is a really important initiative for us. And then, so this is just some visualizations of that. So we know we want to get people to register. We say, hey, you only have one more article left this month. If you set up an account and register, you can do that. And these are kind of the steps along the journey. And just recently, we launched like single sign-on through, sign-on through Google and Apple. So, leveraging other tools to empower our ability to register users and increase our base of known users. So, those are just some kind of backdrop of the numbers, and to just kind of set context. So I think what I really kind of want to talk about is, what do we do with that? And like, how do we start to think about going forward and charting our course? So the first thing we do is we decide, let's take stock of where we are and perform kind of a gap analysis to see, where the opportunities lie. I think a really important one is building what I call revenue use cases. So we're not just collecting data. We're not trying to build first-party data. We're not trying to just make this massive amount of data. We're doing it to drive revenue, both on a consumer side, on an advertiser side. So that's, building out those use cases, help visualize what it could look like, and help kind of build out that opportunity. We talked a little bit about the known user strategy. We want to go from, I think, 1% and to 15 to 50%, and down the road it may be 100%. I think there's a big question over time. What is the value of anonymous users are to publishers, and how do we think about that? We want to build a contextual data strategy to make sure that we're building it for relevant kind of use cases. We also want to be experts in kind of the market conditions that are changing around us, because the foundation of which we have been operating is changing as the market changes. So we need to be up to speed with that. And so one of the tools that I like to use from a leadership perspective is the framework of from to. So when you're thinking about your data strategy, and you really want to say, we talk about taking stock, so that's kind of the left side, and then articulating where you're going to. So from today and in the future to is where we're going. We believe we're going to move from 100% reliant programmatic and direct advertising on third-party data. Our first-party data and advertising is very, very small today, and build out robust data capture and first-party solutions that are complemented by third-party data in the future. So really an eye toward building to where to skate to where the puck is going, so to speak. We're going to build out our think about how our site is structured and taxonomy, and kind of build that out to support these different use cases. And I think we talked a little bit about the known users. We want to set some aggressive targets to shoot for as we kind of build that out. And then kind of on the last 2 points, I think, you need the engine to kind of power this. And we need to bring together disparate systems and bring it into one centralized place, so we can do things like real segmentation, and really empower these revenue use cases that we're building. And then, think about user privacy as kind of core to how we operate, in the core part of the strategy is what we're shooting for. We know it's out there, we recognize it's happening, but we want to make it a central part of where we're going. And so all of that, we took stock in what made us think about, why do we need to think about data? We started talking about some of the data and the data plan, building the data strategy. To what end? Why are we doing this? How are we thinking about it? How do we leverage it? And so I created this chart just to visualize from a consumer or subscription perspective, how do we think about first-party data being enabling us to do more than what we do today? And so, the box there, I would say, is the current world that we operate with, where we sell subscriptions to the acquirer for bundle. And you can kind of get a sense, the x-axis around volume of users, and the y-axis is around pricing or ARPU. So we play in one kind of confined place today. But by getting more first-party data, it should enable us to, shift this demand curve up. So it'll allow us to change the demand curve, to sell more subscriptions, to be smarter about it, to think about premium products experiences. That's really hard today with the amount of first-party data that we have. Think about, Tony mentioned paid verticals, paid newsletters, donations, and micropayments. I know there's been a lot of, talking micropayments, can they work? I don't know, but I would argue they can't work unless we have that first-party data about users, and so we can identify kind of the optimal monetization strategy. So it's thinking about, taking the data you collect and applying it in this context that allows you to expand and grow revenue, is kind of the way we're thinking about it. And the same thing is true on the advertising revenue side. So, we've got a lot of third-party data, as we talked about, that we sell, at a relatively low CPM. if we constrain that and we reduce that, but we grow our first party data because we get deep, intimate knowledge about our audience that we can package and create custom audiences, and then we could sell that to our customers, and maybe we know things through newsletters and other experiences that you just can't through a third party data relationship. It's really, there's a strong case to be made that putting a much bigger bets on building this out, a robust level of first party data is really an opportunity to increase CPMs and increase our digital ad revenue. So that's the way we're kind of thinking about that. And in the reality, all of this comes together is we're trying to move from this big, disparate third and first party advertising and consumer revenue data business into a consolidated, integrated approach around first party data that will allow us to scale both B2C and B2B revenue. I think the timing's right. The market's changing. I think it's now time to place the bet on first party data. And I think we're excited to kind of build out this journey and see where it takes us. So with that, I think I'm going to flip it over to Nikki to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Pete. That is fantastic. And it's really a critical topic that so many people have to keep their eye on today with things that are changing. And so I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, not only from being very data informed at the Boston Globe, but now at the Inquirer. So really, really appreciate you sharing that. So one of the things that has come up that's been a question here that I think is really important is, we recognize that you set those goals, which is great to set a goal, right? You mentioned you have to take the first step of setting what the strategy is so you know what to implement. And that goal was getting from what is about 1% of known users to about 15% in just 1 year, which is actually a significant jump. And then even more aggressive, moving to 50%, by year 3. And so while there are clear business implications, positive ones, of why you'd want to be able to collect first party data, the question that's come in is, what, if any, do you suspect the audience engagement opportunities are? Like, will you see that change at all once you start to have more of this first party data on your audience?
Yeah, I think so. And it's a really good question. So I think once you get greater knowledge of your audience through a first party relationship, I think you can start to do things that are, on the path to personalization. So whether it's through a web experience, so recognizing what content you might resonate the most with you and prioritizing that content, or translating that into a newsletter that's really almost bespoke for each individual user within a certain kind of context. I think that can drive deeper behavior, deeper interaction. We will act as a publisher like we know you, both from kind of an operational perspective, so that all your accounts are connected, to a content perspective. We're serving the content that's most relevant to you. So I think that deepens engagement, that builds kind of the behavior and stickiness that we're looking for. And I think that's really central to what we're trying to achieve, is a deeper and more engaged relationship with our audience, because everything that we talked about in those revenue use cases come from that relationship.
Right, makes sense for sure. So we don't have a ton of time today, Pete, for lots of questions, but I appreciate you putting your contact information here so that other people can get in touch with you, follow up. We'll also do that and collect those via the email, from Shelly that I gave you guys, which was the Shelly at Mather Economics, in case you want to contact her directly. One last one to finish up, and then we're going to let you go and actually go into a quick break, is what changes do you believe are needed specifically on the advertising side of the business when you go to monetize this first party data? Is it new products? What do you foresee as that future related to that?
Yeah, so it is a good question. I would say the first thing is you need kind of the engine from a first party perspective to kind of fuel that. So what I mean by that is you have to collect it, you have to organize it, you have to do it at scale. One of our challenges today is we don't have enough of it. So you need the engine, you need the foundation to build that. And because I think we actually even today have some of the products we could sell, but we just don't have the data to support it. And so it's less on a product side and more on a audience media ability to fulfill. So if I were going to pick one area to focus, it's to grow that and to build with the ability to create those custom audiences that we talked a little bit about. And that will allow you to package that and tell a real rich and robust story for your clients. And I think that's probably the way I would focus in the beginning.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again for being here, Pete. Always great to catch up with you and to tap into your knowledge because it's vast. So really appreciate you being here, and we'll transition at this point. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay. So what we're going to do is launch this poll. You should see it up on your screen. It's super easy to participate in. And the question is this: what is the state of customer data at your organization? So you can see that, we have an enterprise data lake that supports actionable analytics through the organization. Consider that sort of at the top, if you will. What about we use a number of databases housed in different applications and different functions, but for specific processes? Another option here is we are masters of Excel and Tableau. And then of course, what's a customer record? So we've sort of run the gamut here in this spectrum of answers in terms of where you are with your customer data. So if you would, just share with us where you feel you fit best. And at the end of this break, in just a few short minutes, we will reveal the results. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. It is 2:20 Eastern time. I know that was a quick break, but for those of you who participated in the poll, we wanted to show you what the results look like. So remember, the question was, what is the state of customer data in your organization? And it looks as though most of you are doing quite well. If I kind of described it as a spectrum here, 60% of you answered, we use a number of databases housed in different applications across the different functions for specific processes. So way to go. Looks like we're on that transition. And as Pete mentioned, and you've heard earlier, it's really key to the sustainability of our future. So super excited to see that it's going so well. Okay, well, at this point, I want to go ahead and introduce you to our next piece of the puzzle. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Media House, it is a multiple media company. It's in Belgium, the Netherlands, also in Ireland and Luxembourg. And we have Paul Verwilt, who is the COO of Media House here today. And our own Dustin Tetley, who's a director with Mather Economics, is actually going to introduce and interview Paul at the conclusion of his presentation. So at this point, gentlemen, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing Paul Verwilt, CEO of Media House Group. We at Mather have worked very closely with Media House and Paul for a long time now. And more recently, we've moved into an official partnership with Media House. And since then, we've had an opportunity to work even more closely with Paul and his team, and they've been very thoughtful and thorough partners of ours. So we're thrilled to have them here today. And Paul will be speaking about how Media House's subscription engine drives pricing, retention, acquisition, and engagement success. So without further ado, please welcome Paul Verwilt. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me here. What I'll try to do in my 20 minutes and to make sure we have enough time to chat about some questions that you might have. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Media House. It's for kind of a special company. You'll see that. Talk to you about our strategy, but I'll try to focus as much time as I can on what I've called the subscription engine, which is basically what has driven the growth in subscriptions that we've seen over the last 6 to 7 years. But Media's first, as Nick already said, we're a medium-sized European media company. We're active in 4 countries. Our sort of headquarters is in Belgium. This is also where it all started. We have revenues of around 1 billion euros, and we have around 4,500 people, colleagues working for the group. As you can see, we have multiple locations in the different countries. We have both national quality titles, regional titles, also very popular titles. And we're also into the business of digital marketplaces and media ventures as well. What you can see here is we like to call ourselves a young company with deep roots. I'll come to the young in the next slide, but the deep roots, you can see them here. And to the left, you can see what we call the Haarlemse Courant, which is a newspaper that was first published in 1656. that is still being published still as a printed version, but also obviously with just digital platforms. And it's the oldest still existing newspaper which has a print publication in the world, and we're very proud of that. Others might not agree with our standard point of view, but again, we're a newspaper company, so we must be right, I guess. Right? To the right, it's also an important newspaper for us. It's called The Standard. It's the #1 quality newspaper in Belgium. And why is that so important? It was this newspaper that the father of our current chairman saved from bankruptcy, and that was in the late 1970s. So went quite bad, and came out of other business, but saw the value of the brand and the journalism of that brand. And together with a number of other colleague industrial players, he saved the newspaper, and he built it into what it currently is. Now, I said a young company. We were created in 2013, so that is quite young for a European media company. Basically, Media House was created out of two other publishing companies called Corelio and Concentra, the #2 and #3 publishing houses in Belgium. And how that happened is, it made an interesting story, is that when we sat together, I was part of one of Concentra, one of the founders of Media House. I was the chief operating officer as well at the company. When we looked forward and we made our long-term plans, what we saw is that we were still doing okay, but not good enough. And there was a real fear that the business models would not be able to support our journalism anymore, and that we would have to start cutting products, start cutting jobs in journalism. That's something we really didn't want to do. So we made a number of plans, and one of the plans led to a merger with the #2 player in Belgium, Corelio, and we started discussions in April 2013, and in the end of June we had a term sheet that we had agreed on, so it went quite quickly. And what we saw in those first years, 2013, 2014, is that we saw that the merger really worked because of the additional creation of scale. We were able to crank up our profitability quite substantially, and that also allowed us to, let's say, start a quite strong M&A activity in Europe. And you can see here we've called it 1.0, 2.0, and now we're up to 6.0 with 2 acquisitions that we did last year in Luxembourg and in Holland. And this has been a strategy which was a very explicit strategy. We feel that the industry needs scale. We made huge investments, and we invest around 70 million a year in technology, which is quite a lot for what we do. And we can only do that once we have that scale. So we really believe that scale is important. And we'll also be looking to add like 7.0 and 8.0 and so on in the coming years as well, and try to keep growing in that. So that's quite important for us. We won't look at this too long, but that also translated into growing revenue. We started in 2014 with a little bit less than 300 million. Now we're up to almost that billion euros. Profitability has been quite good. This is the operational result that you see on the right-hand side. This would translate into EBITDAs in 2020 of around 180 million euros, which we're quite happy with. We try to focus on an EBITDA percentage of 15, but last year was, let's say, a little bit better than we had hoped for, also because obviously the reasons that we all know. So right, that's the introduction of who we are. This is really important. This is also what Tony talked about when we talked about McClatchy. This is what we do. We are a company of journalism. We believe in this independent journalism, and we believe that the media, the brands that we make, that they make a difference and that they contribute to every person and also the society. And we believe we have a very important role to play. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is that journalism has even become more important with all of the things that are happening in the world. But we have seen, obviously, and I think we all have seen that enormous pressure on our business models. And that's also why we create Media House, to face those challenges. And what I'll try to explain in the rest of the slides is how we are tackling this. And again, sometimes that works out well. Sometimes, obviously, we also make mistakes, and we learn from that. But I'll try to go through the strategy and also focus on the subscriptions within that strategy. So how do we ensure to build a long-term sustainable business? It all starts with a compelling digital news experience. This is what it's all about. It starts with good content and good journalism. Not only that, you have to package that in a good product. Good product, whether it's a newspaper itself, but obviously over the last years, the apps, mobile websites, our podcast apps, and so on have become much more important. So it's a combination of really good content and the product, the digital product, which is really where it all starts. The second element, and this is important, is valuable relationships. We used to focus a lot in the past on relationships. When we had a visitor on our website, we were happy with having a visitor. That has changed over time, over the last years, and we're really focusing on those valuable relationships. Again, valuable is also important because we feel that we provide a lot of value, and we also feel that we can charge for that value. We feel that good journalism has to be paid for at a good price, and I'll come to the pricing and the work that we've done with MATHER and Matt's team on that. But that is really important. This is really key to us. And the third element, obviously, is advertising. But it's really important for us that the second one is much more important than the third one. I also have a background. I haven't spent my whole life in the media, and when I take a step back and it's sometimes a bit weird. We're selling news media products, we're selling subscriptions, and it's a bit weird in the sense that we're charging for something, but the revenue we get from those subscriptions, don't cover the cost of our company. And we have to add advertising to make it sustainable, which is a bit weird. If you compare it, if you go buy a car, for example, and so you get a car and you pay the price, and the car dealer says, and he said, well, what kind of ads do you want on your car? It's like Pepsi or Coke, or what do you want? I say, no, I just want a car, right? I want to pay for this car. It's worth my while paying for that car. And so what we are striving for, even though we also love advertising and the revenues, we really want to strive for our consumers paying the right and a good price for our journalism, and with that revenue that we're able to sustain the journalistic model. Okay, so what has that resulted in? What you see here is for one of our titles, NRC, a company we acquired in 2014. This is the evolution in the number of subscriptions. And what you see until 2015 is that we have a sharp drop. I think we've seen that in a lot of places. But that since then, we've been able to grow that up until 2020. And if you look at 2021, obviously that's also the effect of COVID that this has had. But if you look at how far we are in 2021 compared to 2013, we're quite happy with these numbers. This has been the work of a number of people. You might know Xavier van Leeuwen and Matthijs van der Peppel. They've also written 2 books about how we have done it. Very interesting. If you have some spare time, you should read them. And we've also worked very extensively on this with MATHER, because NRC and MATHER have been partners for a very, very long time. And it's also with the support of Matt's team that we've been able to build this. Now, looking back, how have we achieved this? And then I want to come to the media subscription engine. Basically, that engine to me has 6 ingredients, and I'll go quickly over all 6 of them. Starting with consumer centricity is very important. Getting the insights, getting the data. I think it's also what Pete explained quite well. Technology has become extremely important. The price is essential, and then the team. And the people within that team and the 8 people. So I'll go over all those 6 elements a bit more in detail. Okay. Consumer centricity, I think this is very important. Not too long ago, we were very focused on the product. And the product is very important. And we thought that was the center of everything. And we also thought we knew the customer. We didn't really have a lot of data on the customer, but we just felt we do the customer. What we have been doing since a couple of years is really trying to put that consumer in the center. It's important because if you do that, it increases engagement, loyalty, happy customers, and so on. And what we also saw is that changing this also and working on this also has sort of created an animosity in the company for everybody. So really working around your customer, really focusing on that is making people feel very enthusiastic. It's important to have the top management support on that, but it's also important to make that tangible. For example, what we did, and this is just one example, what we did is that we made teams of 2 people out of different parts of the organization, and they went to visit customers of us physically. They went there and they sat in the kitchen, they had coffee, and they talked about the newspaper, about the digital media, what it meant for them, if they felt we were doing well, what we could improve. A real conversation of an hour or even more in some cases with that customer. And it gives a lot of information, but it also puts yourself close to that customer. It creates a sort of a bond and also an engagement. And it's really important to really put that consumer-driven mentality in your organization. Making it tangible also means that you have to translate it into projects, target, trainings, and so on. Road shows tangible results, but I think that's quite obvious. The second thing which is important, and this is a really important one, is insights. This slide shows the acquisition channels of Telegraaf, which is one of our biggest news media titles, and how this has evolved over the years. So you see that before 2018, a lot of the acquisition was done through field marketing. That's something that's done in Holland, where you try to sell a newspaper subscription on the street. It's quite typical in Holland. Telemarketing, email, direct mail, and those were the main channels. Obviously, there's been an incredible growth, and that really has to do, obviously, with the paywall digital subscriptions in the acquisition that we do online. And so you see how the relation is between the online acquisition channels and all of the other ones. And this is really interesting in the sense, and this is not only digital subscriptions, it is subscriptions, even pure print, big subscriptions, for all kinds of subscriptions. And this is really interesting in the sense that if you look at that online channel, it is really a very exciting channel in the sense that you can measure things, you can orchestrate things. So let's say the way that you can work on that is much more extensive than on the other. Once we have that, what we have done is we created consumer journeys, and this is one of the representations that you have, again, with the different elements, the awareness, registration, consideration, purchase, and so on. Also in the middle, you see a number of the things we measure. For example, when we try to retain people, we measure the consumer effort score, we measure the consumer satisfaction score, and so on and so on. NPS, obviously, something that we measure. I think what's at the bottom is quite important to make that division. Maybe also to refer to what Pete said, is like the propensity to register. That's the first thing. You need a lot of volume of visitors, but it's really, really important to convert those unknown users to known users. And this is something which is hard work. It takes some time. We've been working on this for about seven or 8 years. So most of our titles, they're up to 60, 70, 80% of known users. And this is really important because with that data, you can start working, right? You can start working and trying to see what will trigger them into buying. Article recommendation, personalization. For example, we do personalization on newsletters, we do personalization on homepages, and so on. Intelligent paywalls, and that leads to purchase. And from there, you continue to work. Also, we've done a lot of work on the win back as well. It's not because a subscriber has sort of stopped his subscription that you can't win him or her back. That's really important to focus on that. And we've had very good results with our customer service into getting customers back. So once you have the insights, what do you do with them? I think one thing that we have learned is, and this is a case for us, it might not work in your case, but start with the simple things. So for example, what we saw is that the graph that you see is the black line is that the drop off of trial subscriptions was very strong. And just after a couple of weeks, we were just left with less than 10% of our subscribers. So we stopped doing that. It didn't make any sense. So it's not all about complicated data. Some things are very simple, and you have to start with the simple things. And we started selling 2 and 3 year subscriptions. And now the average subscriptions that we sell are between 2 and 3 years with automatic renewals. And then you can go into more detailed and more complex measurements. We have systems we call article DNA, which really focus on the content. We have reader DNA, focusing on obviously on the reader, trying to combine then work and churn models, on retention models, and so on. You can do that later once you have all the points, but you really need to start with the simple things. Technology, I won't go into this slide because we'll talk for a couple of hours on this one, but it's really important to have the good tech. What we have seen is that we used to build a lot. We've moved more to a buy strategy now because there's a lot of very good technology that you can see. There's a lot of very new technology as well in buying all those components and trying to stitch them together in a service-oriented architecture. This is really important, and this takes a lot of time, a lot of investment. As I said, we invest around 70 million euros a year in technology, which is quite substantial. The pricing is very important. Obviously, the volume is important, but the pricing is also very important. I remember a time when it was all about gut feeling, and we would have discussions on how you price things, and someone said, like, let's do 2%. So we said, no, let's do 3% because we did just 1 last year, and paper prices have gone up, so we have to cover for that. I think that's all past time. We've been working since a lot of years, as I mentioned, with Matt's team on market-based pricing techniques, where we try to maximize the customer lifetime value and minimizing the subscriber losses. At the right-hand side, you see an example of this where we typically had increases of 2-3% every year, where in a number of cases we went up to 10 to 12%, not the 79 that was mentioned earlier, but 10% on a full subscription without almost having no losses if you compare that to the control group. So that was really interesting. And we've learned not to be afraid anymore. Like the first time we wanted to do this, everybody was really scared that it wouldn't work. The data showed that it should work. So don't be afraid. Let the data work. Let the data talk, and make decisions based on that, and not just your feel. And obviously, also, I think that's also something that Pete said and Tony said. It's testing, right? You test things. You have control groups, and everything doesn't work for the same cohort of users. And then the last two items, and I'll try to go a bit quicker, is that this is how our organization used to look like. There were like silo teams with everybody having targets, and that hopefully then that would lead to sort of the group and global target. What we are working now with, and that is still in progress, is that we have self-managed teams, cross-functional teams, where people out of different environments work together with a single goal that is for the group, and that leads to the group goal. And this is really has given a lot of positive energy to the members in this team. It's quite tough. It's a whole journey. We're not there yet, but certainly where we have gone and where we've seen the successes, this has had a massive impact. And then last but not least is, and it's not always possible, I understand, but really try to hire A people, right? A players hire A players, and B players hire C players. This is really important. You need the right people, and you can't make any concessions when it comes to having the best people in the areas where you can make the difference. That means that you need to have people-oriented, but also result-oriented people, really eager to learn. They don't come with the knowledge, that's not possible, but if you're eager to learn, then you'll get there. And you really have, as a team, you have to be unanimous in when you're hiring someone, and also make zero concessions when you're working with those employees, doing their annual reviews. We're quite strict. We really just want to work with the best people, because they really make a difference for And so I showed you the results that we had for NRC. These are a couple of the other titles that we have. Right, the biggest title, Telegraph, popular title, where we've also seen since we came in and sort of adapted that knowledge that we have, those processes that we have been able to grow the number of total paid relationships, because that's how we measure them today. And we've seen the same thing on the right-hand side in the North Hollands Dagblad, which is a local regional title. Exactly the same thing by applying these learnings, these mechanisms, using technology, the insights that we've been able to grow our subscriptions. So with that, I conclude. I think I went a bit over time. Sorry for that, Dustin, but I hope there's still some time for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Paul. And we do have a few questions. And one I wanted to start out with, the journey you guys have been on over the past 7-8 years, and obviously the results have been very impressive. Is there something from the Media House subscription engine or otherwise that you'd like to reinforce as a place that you'd start if you were to acquire a new publisher, for example, or if someone is somewhere else along the path that you'd recommend starting, and something you'd like to drive home?
What we do, this is obviously we've been acquiring companies quite aggressively over the last couple of years. So we always come in and then there's work to do. There's also a lot to learn. I must say, this idea of this engine and how it's composed, that was not Media House's idea. That's something that we learned when we made an acquisition. We saw what was done at NRC, what you guys also did at NRC, and that got us going. So we learn a lot by doing these acquisitions. But really, it's making analysis. Where do we are at this point in time? Right? Do we have the right people? People is very important. You need to bring in the right people. What we try to do is work with the local team in the company that we acquire, but also bring in the knowledge. That's important. Right? See what data you have, and then work on that. See what you do makes sense. Pricing is also a very interesting one because what we see is everybody's typically quite conservative with pricing because it's already very expensive and should we really increase the price, but it's never measured. So what we start with is an analysis and see where the critical points are and try to work on.
Great. One of the things I've seen you guys do is the long-term offers. It's something unusual that I haven't seen too many other places. And you mentioned the full stop of trial subscriptions as well. Is that something that you guys feel is appropriate for all news publishers, or are there other factors to consider that people should keep in mind? I know you mentioned your average acquisition subscription was something over 2 years now, which would be really high, I think, compared to most people on the call here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's also to answer your first question, I wouldn't advise everybody to do it. It is what worked with, in this case, with NRC. It worked really well. So you have to measure. I mean, this is only because we started really measuring and said, well, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, we sell a subscription and then after a couple of weeks, the consumer's gone. That does not make any sense. Huh? Whether it's in a newspaper company or whether it's another company, it doesn't make any sense. So we stopped doing that. We see different results in other titles in other countries as well. So it differs per title, per type of title, and per country. However, overall, we've substantially reduced those trials because at the end they did make a difference. What we have seen is people were really, and we didn't anticipate that, but people were really willing to go for longer term subscriptions. Obviously, there's a price incentive. Obviously, if they do that, they get a lower price, they get a discount, and we also make clear that that's the discount they get, and then after that they go to the regular price, and that has worked quite well. But it's also something we learned. We didn't know. It was first time we said, "Oh, this is a bit strange, right?" There's people taking 2-3 years. It was also quite weird for us. But we started trying it, and with a lot of titles, certainly with what we call the quality newspapers, that works quite well. But I think it's important. What's already been said before by Tony and Pete is that you have to measure, and there are substantial differences between titles, in our case, between countries as well. So it's all about the measuring and acting on what you measure.
Great. I know we're almost out of time, so perhaps just one last question. Can you elaborate on the changes in the hiring process specifically? I know you mentioned hiring A players hire A players, B players hire C players. Is there something that you guys have changed that you'd recommend as far as recruiting talent and the decisions around whether to hire someone, or anything else you can elaborate on?
Yeah, I think we've changed a lot when it comes to working with the teams and with every employee. I think what we've seen is that, as I said already, is that you need the number of people that can really make a difference. Certainly when it comes to skills, knowledge skills. If you have a very good person and you have a good person, or you have a bad person, the difference between a very good person and a good person, also in tech, is incredible. Right? I would rather have one really good, I would rather have, let's say, one A player than 3 B players. I wouldn't have C players because they even have a negative influence on. So the difference between, in a number of areas between A and B is huge. What we have changed is we've become more critical. And sometimes it's difficult because you don't have the A person, and then you need to decide not to hire and try to find another solution. That's sometimes what we do. But we're quite critical about people that we hire. As I said, for example, and that's not true in every, because we also work relatively independent, or the companies work relatively independent, but most companies, they're very strict, and there's a unanimous decision, right? In the past, we used to work on consensus, and somebody said, I'm not quite sure. And then we said, okay, well, but would you be against hiring? And said, oh, now we really want everybody in the team. We involve more people, but everybody needs to be unanimous. I mean, there needs to be an added value of bringing her or him into. So that's one thing I think that we've changed. And also at the yearly process, we're more critical. And if something doesn't work out, we start first of all, we try to improve training and so on. And if that doesn't work, then it's also better both for both parties too.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul. That was a really great session. We're thrilled to have you. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me. Bye.
I have the honor of introducing Juan Pardinas, and he is the general editorial director of Reforma, which is an independent newspaper based in Mexico. He was appointed in 2019 after a pretty exciting and interesting career. So I'll take a minute just to go through that. He was the general director of the Mexican Institute for Competitiveness, which is a nonprofit research and public policy center in Mexico. He was also a professor for the National Autonomous University of Mexico and the London School of Economics, and actually served as a correspondent for CNN covering India and Japan. He holds a doctorate from the London School of Economics, a master's from the University of Sofia, based in Japan, and a degree in political science from the National University of Mexico. So very impressive, rich background for a chief editor. On a personal note, I'll mention, I met Juan shortly after he started as part of the Google News Initiative project in South America, and just was very impressed by his sort of his vision, his leadership, and I think Reforma was actually, I think, the best publisher in terms of converting from kind of legacy print focus before he started to being one of the best digital first, focused on transformation, one of those kind of publishers throughout the program. So just very, very impressed by his work. And with that, I will let Juan take it from here. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you, Arvid. Thank you for that very kind presentation. Just yesterday, I was listening to the podcast by Ersa Klein in the New York Times, and he was interviewing a journalist called Anna Sale, which specializes in hard conversations. And She has a podcast about the topic says a lot. It's about death, sex, and money. And what I thought is that we are going to have and we are having through this symposium of matter economics, a hard conversation, in the sense that we are talking about ideas, experiments, learning process of an industry and the financial sustainability and future prosperity of an industry, which is not any kind of industry. It's one industry that it's kind of the breathing system of democracy, the breathing system of democratic politics. It's hard to find a human right as the freedom of expression that it's so intertwined with the functioning of a market, and this, in this case, is the market of ideas, the industry of publishing, of journalism. So this really it's a hard conversation, and as the podcast of this journalist Anna Sale says, it's not about death. I would like to put it in a more positive light. It's about sustainability, about prosperity, about the future. It's about money because it's about financial sustainability. And I'm sorry to disappoint that it's not, my talk won't have any sex content, as the podcast says. But let me start with this hard conversation and what we have learned so far. First, as you have heard from other presentations, what we have learned is that content is the king in this industry. Segmentation is the queen. How you reach different audiences, how you learn about what each reader wants. If content is the king and segmentation is the queen, we would say that the reader is God. So we're moving to a very theological question, which is basically, how do you interact with this God? How do you determine your conversation? How do you learn with this audience that will basically define the prosperity and the future of your company, of our industry? And basically the only way we have to talk to them is through data. As the presentation says, in God we trust, but everyone else should bring data to the table. Which kind of data? That it's a tough question. We should get different kind of data for different kind of audience. And for me, as when I was starting as a director here in Reforma in Mexico City, the collaboration with Matter Economics was crucial, because as might happen with other newspapers that are gathered today here, we are, our house was built on paper, and it has been very successful company for almost a century. So starting to have this conversation, this hard conversation, this inevitable conversation on how we have to trigger and accelerate this digital transition. Matter Economics team was key to jumpstart this conversation inside Reforma. And for that, I would always be grateful to Arvid, to Catherine Ruane, how the several conversations started through the work with Matter, and how we start inserting data in the table. Reforma was born in 1997, but the first newspaper of the company started in a city in the north of Mexico, Monterrey, almost 100 years ago. So I'm sure we all have these kind of war stories of the challenge to bring this transition and start this hard conversation in the context of companies that have been decades or almost a century and have been very successful with a business model that needs to change. And the best way to have these conversations is precisely using data. We came from a different kind of place that most of newspapers, because Reforma made a very daring decision sometime in 2003, and it was to create a very hard wall to access digital content. As you may see in the presentation, in this article in the Economist from 2009, it talks about how Reforma was one of the first newspapers to build this very hard wall to isolate our editorial content from anyone that was not a paid subscriber. And basically that model survived from 2003 very successfully until 2020, which when this hard conversation led us to think that maybe we should try to appeal to different audiences that we were not reaching through this very hard paywall. So in this case, we are walking a kind of a different path that most of our competitors and friends in the industry, because most of the newspapers are moving from having no wall at all or having a flexible wall to having a kind of a subscriber digital system. We have implemented this for almost 18, 19 years. And we have to have a more flexible, have more windows into the wall, so new audiences could see what we are doing, why it works to take out their credit card and become regular subscribers. In this conversation, in this kind of tipping point in the trajectory of Reforma as a group, the work of Matter Economics was extremely important for us. And having okay, as I was saying, the challenge we have was to work in a different way. So in the beginning of 2020, we reinvented the paywall to offer more flexibility to distinct audience segments, and try to define the patterns of consumption of our editorial products with the most detail we can. And this came from a context where we usually just print the paper, send the paper to more than 100,000 homes in Mexico City, sell the paper in the streets, and basically didn't know what our readers were choosing, which were the favorite editorials we had. The company was so successful in paper that we didn't bother in a way to ask these questions, and it took us time to start considering, well, why we are relevant to our audiences, which kind of information they are looking. Sometimes success becomes an obstacle for change, and in this case, despite the success that the company had for decades of centuries, it was about time that we would start wondering how we could reach a different audience experience and what we could learn from them. A new paywall allows non-subscribers to register and access limited editorial content. This new audience opened the opportunity to access to new potential subscribers. And Paul Berwilt was speaking of something I consider very important in this, and it was about making mistakes. Obviously, when you are doing experiments, you do make mistakes. Bad things happen, and sometimes hypotheses don't come out as you thought they were. And we work in an industry that mistakes are extremely punishable. You cannot have a mistake in a front page of the newspaper, because that could mean the end of your journalistic career. That could mean that the professional future of a colleague is in peril given making a mistake in journalism. So bringing these ideas that we should test and we should be open to fail doing these experiments has been an extremely interesting experience on the context of a group of colleagues which work every day, every week, every month, every year, doing their best, verifying everything in order not to commit any kind of editorial mistakes. But at the same time, we should learn that in this trial and error effort, this constant search for what is the right tune, how we could understand better this constant learning curve, we need to learn mistakes. So for me, that has been a very interesting experience to try to create an environment of tolerance, of learning in an industry, in a company, and a profession, journalism, which mistakes are not and cannot be allowed. And the thing is, the truth is that this is, there's no magic formula here. This is not like the Colonel Sanders and KFC that you find the right formula for the fried chicken that millions of people would like, and you get the formula and you get the chicken and you get the problem solved and you get the financial future of your company basically guaranteed. Basically here we have to change the recipe of the chicken every given time with different challenges. Now with a change in an algorithm, in a search engine, we really need to rethink the whole model. So human beings that lead these conversations, that lead these companies, the companies itself as a culture, as a group of people, as a team, we need to start kind of walking at the speed of these changes, and how a simple change in algorithm could really put us on square one and start the whole conversation from the beginning. But in a way, we have to see this with humility and modesty in order to be more open to commit mistakes and be more open to the learning experience that forces us this change in the context of digital platforms, that it's a permanent market of disruption and change. One of the things that have worked very well, and it came part of the conversation with Arvid and Catherine, was the importance of newsletters. We didn't have any newsletters at the beginning of 2020. Now we have 4 different newsletters, one of soft content of what should people do in the weekend. Obviously in the context of COVID-19, that idea went into the freeze and then was reshaped of what could you do at home during the pandemic. And then 3 different newsletters, one for subscribers, one for anonymous followers, and one for registered followers. And we select the content for each of these groups, and so far has been one of the most successful schemes we have made. Then we changed the landing platform for subscriptions. Basically, we thought that giving a lot of options to our potential subscribers will help them in the decision process. We offer them more than 20 different subscription packages. At the end, and thanks to analyzing the data, we found out that this was not the best idea. From 21 different packages, we simplified just to 3 packages. And for example, we have seen with this very basic layout, we have seen a relevant increase in the amount of people that subscribe yearly instead of monthly. We even have weekend subscriptions before they're not working anymore. We have these 3 packages which make the decision-making process of our potential subscribers much more easier. And as I was saying, this is a continuous learning process. There's no magic formula, or the magic formula that works today maybe won't work in a year or 6 months. So you need this sense of constant challenge to have very clear focus on certain objectives, on certain goals, but at the same time, understand that the terrain could change and the map is not territory. What you expected, the route you expected to follow to achieve certain goal will not be necessarily be there on the digital realm as disruption occurs so frequently. And there are several routes to strengthen the attraction and permanence of new subscribers. All this goes through very strong content. But in that regard, I was very confident. I'm very confident in the work of my colleagues here in the newspaper. That itself was not really the problem. The problem is how to learn to build these bridges with different audience, and how to make the digital package of this strong editorial content reach to the new audiences, to younger audiences that most of them are not so willing or not so open to pay for digital content besides Netflix and Spotify. To pay for digital reading material is, at least in the context of the Mexican market, it's not a tradition. Real-time information also helps to understand the traction of the content. We are not leaving the decision of our front page or the hierarchy of our news to an algorithm, but sometimes a news that appear in print in page 3 or page 4, suddenly we find out that has a lot of traction digitally, and we start asking which questions we didn't answer in the first draft of this news, how we could take it further to satisfy this urge that at the beginning our original hunch did not expect that had that kind of reception in our audiences. So that was also a constant learning process by the hour, in real time, to test your hunches and to have clear goals. One thing that MATHER insisted all the way was A/B testing. I think we should be very familiar with this. We should not fall in love with our hypotheses, because we could get to confront very tough realities when we see the data, when we see the results. We should not fall in love with our hypothesis, but we should fall in love with the testing mechanism. But we could, because we could learn a lot, that would make much more easier our hard conversations. And I want to finish with a metaphor from Africa. The metaphor says that every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up and knows that she has to run faster than the faster lion in the group, because if not, she will not see the end of the day. At the same time, the lion knows, the lioness in this case, knows that she has to run faster than the gazelle, because if not, her and her group will go at the end of the day with the stomach empty. So no matter if you are a gazelle or a lioness, every time the sun rises, you know you have to run faster, learn faster, and be willing to have these hard conversations with data in order to thrive in these digital transitions. thank you very much. And if there's some time, I'm open for questions.
That's excellent, Juan. That's I love that analogy too. It's no matter which side you are, you have to run faster. And also just thank you. I know it's been a very I know there's terrible news in Mexico City earlier this week, so I know it's very busy for you. So we're just thankful you could spare some time for us today. So it looks like we have a couple of questions. So one just you mentioned kind of the transformation and some of the things you did to really achieve some of your goals. Is there kind of a I guess one or two things that you felt that were very much a game changer for you, or like whether it was a decision point or, to your point, a data or an A/B test that was kind of an inflection point in your transformation? I'm just curious, but any example you could share with us there.
Yeah, I think the use of newsletters had really opened our eyes, because now we are visiting. We had these very strong digital products, digital editorial products, but we had this huge wall. We used to joke that the only thing we miss to protect the wall is some dragons there. So we had to take the dragons out of the wall, then open some windows. And then we see that through the newsletters, more than 500,000 people are getting some interaction with our digital products. So that has reflected in more traffic to the page and more opportunity to have people that do not know us directly to have some experience with our digital content. We have an additional challenge, which is populism. As you had in the United States a few months ago, you had a head of state that recurrently criticized media. We had the same experience here in Mexico, and for good and bad, most of this lack of empathy to the work of professional journalists in Mexico has been focused in Reforma. Just to give you an idea, the President López Obrador every morning gives a press conference. So in his 2 years in government, he has given around 600 press conferences, more or less, give or take. From these 600 press conferences, he has criticized Reforma more than 380 times. So in a regular week, we have direct criticism, sometimes with slides of our front page in his press conference. So for us was also important to open ourselves to a new audience that might be defined by the views of the president, and show them that we have been a strong, we have made strong and critical journalism. We have criticized all presidents. We have criticized power as a definition of our DNA as a company. But in these times, you could reinvent not just fake news, but you could reinvent history. You could reinvent the history of a country. You could reinvent the history of a newspaper. And what President López Obrador has tried to do in his press conference and the constant reference to Reforma is to reinvent what Reforma as a newspaper has been in the history of Mexican democracy. So opening these windows in the wall has allowed us to reach to audiences that didn't know our content and have certain kind of, at least aim to have certain kind of equilibriums in these national conversations about what Reforma means in the Mexican journalism and what the president thinks. So we are reaching to new audiences and at the same time giving our side of the story, not as the concept that President López Obrador uses is not fake news, he says we have other data. And we say, well, we just have one single kind of data, which is or sometimes data produced by the president's government, by the own government. And what we do every day is bring the truth to our readers. And this digital transformation has also helped us to thrive in these very choppy waters of political populism.
Yeah, that's. I know that the challenge is perhaps in Mexico and some other places are perhaps even tougher for a newspaper to survive, where there's not the kind of luxury of some of the institutions or other just basic things that perhaps we take for granted here. But I think your point on reaching the consumer directly is probably a universal shared insight there. We have one more question, a couple more questions actually. So one is just on your kind of trend in print copies, kind of decline over the last few years, and the trend in digital subscriptions over the last 3 years. I don't know if you can share any specific numbers, but just in general, how those two trends have been realized for you?
No, we haven't reduced the printing days. Actually, I'm very happy and proud because we just brought a wonderful young reporter, and she's going to write exclusively on Saturdays and an op-ed that makes reporting with opinion. It will be in the op-ed page on Saturday. So no, we actually are investing on our Saturday and Sunday editions. Obviously, the Sunday edition has suffered with the pandemic because we had a specific magazine, a weekly magazine on traveling, and obviously we are not doing that much traveling. And we had also a specific section on restaurants in Mexico City, which is not because I'm from here, but I think it's one of the best places to eat in the world. So it was a very thriving section, and obviously now it has suffered. But as a newspaper, we are running from Monday to Sunday. You could get our edition on the streets of Mexico City. And subscriptions are digital subscriptions are in much better shape than they were 2 years ago. We actually haven't reached the sweet spot, and numbers I would feel totally comfortable. I still feel like the gazelle looking with the side of my eye that there's a lion there and I have to run fast. And I think this feeling is shared by my colleagues. They are in a much better position than they were in 2019, but it's not that I feel that this digital transition has finished. We are not in a position that we could say that the revenue of the newspaper is totally guaranteed by our digital side. We're still have to we're way back for that point. We still have to work hard, have these hard conversations in order to achieve this point, but we are much more closer there than we were 2 years ago.
Are you, one question I think is important to ask is, all the things you're doing are obviously the successes. Are there things that you deliberately stopped doing over the last 2 years, especially as you're kind of leading the transformation, things that you used to do that perhaps you found were not as impactful on digital transformation?
So far, well, one important transition is we have a subscription price, and there the data from MATHER played a relevant part. A subscription price that was focused in protecting print. Now we have a digital price to be competitive in the digital realm. So that was one relevant change that occurred some 18 months ago and was a key part in this increase of digital subscriptions. So far, from our failures, I wouldn't consider them a total failure. I would consider that we should try harder because we're still having good results, not as we expected, but maybe we should put more energy in things like the newsletter, thinking of diversifying and segmentation of newsletters. If we can be as successful as we have been in these kind of broad topic newsletters, I see a lot of potential if we could focus, for example, in these sections I talked about of travel and food. Once the economy keeps on going, and we could see, hopefully it's still months away, but we could see the pandemic in the rear view mirror, maybe we should think on expanding the newsletters and hopefully having the same impact that we have had in these kind of broad content newsletters.
Again, thank you so much, Juan, for your time today. And as always, I look forward to staying in touch. I'll give it off to Nikki to take us to the next session.
Yeah, thank you, Arvid and Juan. So appreciative of that global perspective that you brought to the symposium. And now what we're going to do is actually turn our spotlight to Lori Truitt, but I want to give you just a quick overview of what you can expect. She's our last speaker today, but she has a powerful story to take you through that involves struggling, resource-starved, under pressure media organizations that are going through a transformation. Sounds a bit like everyone, doesn't it? And so Lori, if you don't know her personally, has spent time as USA Today's digital consumer marketing team lead. And in that role, she was responsible for everything to get people to ultimately be nurtured all the way through to a subscription. So propensity models, their native apps, what their pricing look like, and their product roadmap. And you might not know how large that is. It actually spans 109 sites plus USA Today. But for the last year, Lori has transitioned and is the Global Vice President for Consumer Growth of Time Magazine. And in this role, she's building their roadmap, she's looking at their strategy, but also the team interconnectivity. And all of this is super important as she looks through the path to subscription growth. And so she's had two very distinct paths for that success. And she's here today to share it with us and take some of her key points away. So I'm pleased to welcome Lori Truitt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nikki. It's nice to see you. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Matt. This is my second symposium, my first virtual one. So thanks for having me. So I've spent my life in news and in newspapers, starting out at the New York Times. I worked at NBC News. As Nikki mentioned, I spent 3 years at Gannett, where I oversaw subscriptions for our 110 newspapers. I know they've grown since, and USA Today. And I have recently jumped over to Time Magazine, which I'm super excited to tell you about. Time has evolved drastically, I would say, in the last year and before that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So we're going to talk about the path to subscription and nurturing our potential subscribers. I'm going to talk a little bit about our team over there, which is really vital to the growth and the health of what is happening over there, which is super exciting. So our journey at Time. So I want you guys to think about, even though we are a legacy print magazine, you should really think about Time as a 100-year-old startup, which I'm super excited to talk about. Time was actually purchased by Mark Benioff, which I'm sure a lot of you know is, through Salesforce about 2 years ago. And we have recently evolved a lot, which I'm going to talk about over the next 2 slides. But, we recently launched registration. Believe it or not, we did not have a registration product in December 2020. We launched a digital subscription in February of 2021. So this is all really brand new. So a lot of you and myself have been in this world of digital and digital subscriptions for a very long time, but it's really new for us, and we are really evolving and growing. We have numerous brands at Time, which are really well known to a lot of us. We have Time 100, Person of the Year. Some of you might not really be familiar with. We have Time for Kids. We just recently launched successfully Time 100 Companies, and all of these are really important to what we use to drive our content, and actually now are using to drive subscriptions, which is really, really important. We are the first media company, which I'm really excited about, to actually launch crypto payments. We actually brought it up, and this is really magnificent, and really hats off to our product team. to launch crypto subscriptions. We launched it literally in 3 weeks. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. We are really starting to grow in the NFT space, which some of you may not be familiar with, but basically is anything digital drawings. We were lucky enough, we went out with 3 time covers and we sold them in about a week, believe it or not, via auction in the Clubhouse social space for over like $500,000. We sold 3 NFT covers via auction, via crypto, which is pretty exciting. And this is really just the beginning of what you're going to see us do via crypto. Yes, we're selling our subscriptions in this alternative payment mechanism, but there's more to come in the crypto space for us. We are laser focused on innovation, building a better future, and really talking about these conversations that matter, which is something that I'm going to get into a little bit more. And this really comes around our Time 2030 initiative. So this is just a few of our tentpole brands. So we have Time for Health, which really is helping us drive our subscriptions. Time for Health is the standalone kind of like segment within our brand that really talks about, it's one of our biggest, I want to say like audience growth areas. We have Time for Health videos, Time for Health talks. We have a whole brand around Time for Health. Time Studios, it's really, think of it as our TV area. We were just recently, you've probably seen it in the news, we just received the exclusive documentary rights for Inspiration 4, which is the civilian mission to space. I'm sure you've seen it with Elon Musk, which we're super excited about. This is about, the teacher going to space, which is really cool. And, we have the rights to that. We actually we have the rights to the production and creative of the Kanye West documentary that will be on Netflix. Time 2030 is really our decade-long project that we're super proud of. It's about building a better future, and it's really going to be focused on climate, sustainability, leadership, innovation, and equality, where we actually have an advisory committee made up of leaders, celebrities, really about building this better future, and it's really what we're committed to over the next 10 years. Time for Kids is our education product. It's for K through 6, and we now have an in-home product. We really work hard about, getting our product into the hands of kids, which will actually help us develop and get the regular time product in the hands once they kind of evolve and grow out of that. And then our Time 100 talks is something I'm really proud of. We, obviously had to make a switch with the pandemic. Our in-person events really weren't happening when Corona hit last year. So we really switched to a digital virtual conversation. It's hosted by Time editors. It happens once a week. We have about, sometimes 3 to 4 to 5 guests. Some are an hour, some are 2 hours. It's a spotlight conversation where we have anywhere, up to 1,000, 2,000, depending. Sometimes it's international. There's 7,000 people or plus, where, it's CEOs, activists, entertainment. We have Dolly Parton to the president of, on the same exact chat, talking about issues that matter around climate, energy, education. These are huge drivers for us, huge ways to talk to our audience, huge inspiration that actually are helping us drive more audience and lead to subscriptions and really actually fulfill on a mission around our brand. So, acquisition really starts with engagement. We have to engage our audience so they want to learn more. They want to learn more about us. We all have the same objective, whether in magazines, whether in newspapers, and our objective is always to drive revenue and grow that subscription number. But that can't be our number one focus. While I was at Gannett, I made an change, right away that we really need to focus on the beginning, the top of the funnel, invest our money in newsletters, invest our money in engagement, invest our money in registration. And, that's where it really needs to start. So we need to be really focused on driving engagement, nurturing our users, and building that relationship with them. I have always said to my team, I don't need them to, our users to subscribe today. I need them to subscribe tomorrow. And I really stand by that message. You will always have a better user a retained user and someone that stays longer if they subscribe, not today, not because you're putting them and blocking them because you're giving them a 99-cent offer. They will subscribe because they are ready to subscribe, they are nurtured, and they understand the value of your product. So whether they subscribe today or whether they subscribe next Thursday, they will stay longer because you have put your effort into making them understand why they want to pay you. So why? What's the why? Engaged prospects become more engaged and longer retained subscribers. So, we all know the formula, we all know why. So the real question is, how do you do it? Why do you do it? What do you need to do? So understanding your target audiences. So, we really kind of build a funnel and really try to formulate, like, what does this look like? And what I do and what I did at Time and our team is we really took this funnel and we actually added another area where we put, how does product help with like each one of these steps? So you have your anonymous users at the top, and then you have your newsletter readers. You really need to invest in growing, even if your team doesn't own newsletters. I highly recommend that you go out and you invest in newsletter acquisition. So really driving new audiences into the funnel through newsletter acquisition, through paid social, co-registration, online newsletter prompts, which I'll talk about a little more, but really investing in newsletter acquisition, because that is really the top and how you get them to take that next step. And really jumping into turning them into a registered user. So prompting, readers to register, going from anonymous to newsletter to the registration process, incentivizing them to register, like, to get additional content, free content, whatever it may be, is definitely part of the funnel process. Then engaged users. So I'm a true advocate of investing in content marketing and investing, pre-subscription content marketing. So really looking at, what those users look like, how often they're coming back, what they're reading, and really going out and really trying to develop a relationship with those people through content and like bringing them back to read more so they actually get closer to hitting your paywall. So if you have your registered user list, who's reading 3 articles, who's reading 4 articles, whatever it may be, bringing them back and pushing them into reading more so they organically don't even realize that they're hitting your paywall because they're reading your content more. The formula is easy. It's just really using data and understanding your audience and putting them in their own buckets and bringing them back more often. It doesn't have to be through social. It could be through newsletters. We use, when you register at Time, you automatically get put on a daily newsletter, so it organically happens. It just makes it easy. We do look at the users that are registered and how engaged they are on each newsletter. We do use tactics to, which is kind of different than a lot of people, but we do have re-engagement tactics for newsletters. So for instance, on our daily brief newsletter, we have re-engagement tactics where we actually send re-engagement emails analyzing who's opening the emails, who's not, when they drop off, and we send re-engagement emails. And the re-engagement, we're actually working on this now. The re-engagement emails are not as simple as like, you're not opening your emails, to stop receiving them, opt out. It's really about, okay, you can actually take this daily brief newsletter and you can make it so you only receive it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can stop receiving it at night and only receive it in the morning. You can actually listen to it in audio if you want. And the third thing is like, here's all the content you're missing by not opening this email. So really try to come up with tactics to keep them engaged in your newsletters, because these are what tactics are going to organically push your users to subscribe. Paid subscribers, convert engaged users. We all know that your registered users will convert higher than your anonymous or newsletter subscribers. It's a no-brainer. They get to the page, they get to your landing page, they get to your checkout, they can skip a step, they convert a much higher. It's very easy to understand. And then retaining your subscribers, you put in aggressive retention programs. The non-sexy thing about credit card processing, we all know it's painful, but you have to implement it. Like, what are the tools around getting more credit cards to go through? What is the retention programs that you're using? I know, Nikki, you asked earlier, like, what things are you doing for retention? I think one of the challenges with news, and I have seen it through my entire career, is, you know, you're competing and we're putting these benefits in for retention, but I have seen it year over year in company I've worked for, we never stick through. Like, you put in retention benefits and it's like, oh, you're going to meet with the editors. Oh, you're going to have this, but no one ever sticks through with them. So you need to find that tangible, and you need to find those retention benefits that we're actually going to stick through and hold ourselves accountable for the retention benefits that we're actually applying and actually giving to our subscribers. If you look at, you know, all of the different subscriptions, like years ago, you were only really competing with like magazines, newspapers, and cable. Now, like when you look at someone's bill, there's like 10 subscription services everyone has. So where do you fall within all those subscriptions, and how do you line up? Like now people have food, clothing subscriptions, kids subscriptions, you know, shavings, razor subscriptions. So you really need to figure out like, what are your benefits and how are you adding value to a person's life, and really live up to the benefits that you're saying you're going to give them, and how do they add value to their life. So really make sure you're, you know, pulling through and really adding value, and really, if you're just going to do something, make sure you continue to do it. And then really loyal subscribers, you know, we don't stop at retention. There's loyal subscribers. You have retention, you're going to do it, but who are those really loyal subscribers who are coming so much? Don't forget about them. I have found, like, yeah, you always want to look at, when you're doing retention, you have like your low engaged, your no engaged users, which I have always called zombies, your low engaged users, medium, high, and then super high. And everybody always focuses on the people who are paying you and not coming, the low, the medium, but you always forget about the high. Don't forget about them, because these are like the people, your bread and butter, who are actually keeping you above water and who are always going to be loyal to you. So don't forget about them. Let me click my clicker here. It's not going. Hold on one second. There we go. So be funnel focused. So there's 3 core initiatives to move potential subscribers from anonymous to paying subscribers, right? This is what everybody always speaks to. It's probably in everybody's deck. Get them to come, get them to stay, get them to pay, get them to retain, right? So really prioritize newsletter signups, drive registration, engage users with content. So usually we have this in a funnel. Like, I think, you know, someone on my team, Kristen, she put this in a circle, which I love, because it really never ends. It's a circle, right? So it's not just a funnel top to bottom. Once you get them to retain, you need to start all over and get them to continue coming. You need to continue to get them to stay. You need to continue to get them to pay. It never ends. It's a continuous cycle. So I think putting it in a circle is a better way to approach it than a funnel. So I just want to, you know, recognize that we need to continue. It's always working. It's never stopped. Like, once you get them, like I said before, high loyalty, you need to continue the circle. It's just a never ending process. And I think a lot of people, once you get them to high loyalty, you stop, which you can't do. So speaking of getting them to come, so really focus on marketing, you know, budget newsletter acquisition, even if it's not your area. I really, really highly suggest that you invest in growing your newsletter subs. These are your best prospects for turning into subscribers. So work closely with your newsroom, really understand the value and who's opening your newsletters, how you can convert them. And when I say really understand, it's not just emailing them with a subscription offer. Really understand the engagement. Like, don't over email them. Really even understand the engagement. Email them based on engagement. Users that sign up for newsletters really care about your content, and they have the most potential to become the ambassadors for your brand. So these are the people that you really want to care about. And then watch the engagement of those newsletters over time, and then optimize the campaign to drive more qualified leads. So, you know, we use a partner to drive co-registration around newsletter signups, and we really analyze like the engagement of those people. How often are they coming? Does the engagement drop? So you don't want to just like go sign up a huge list of people. You really want to analyze the people you're signing up, and are they actually engaging? Are they opening the newsletters? So you really want to build out your marketable list, but make sure they're qualified users as well. And then, you know, I think Pete touched on this a little bit, but registration, you know, it's like the first step is getting them to, you know, sign up for a newsletter, and then really putting them into a registration, you know, process and getting them to sign up. We use a 3-5 model where once they hit Article 3, we ask them to register, and they get 2 additional articles. And then when they get to, you know, their 5th article, they're actually asked to pay. So, you know, registered users convert at a higher rate. You know, I have seen anywhere between a 15 to 40% higher, depending on audience, depending on the brand that I've worked for. So, you know, I think one task that nobody really analyzes and a lot of people don't look at is you really need to understand and measure how long it takes your registered users to subscribe versus a non-registered user. So you really want to measure that path to subscription from a registered user. So if you sign someone up, what's that path to subscription? And you should look at it for digital and for print, because it will be different. And then build your marketing tactics and checkout experience based on those metrics. Customize the experience for your registered users because it will be different. And look at it for desktop and for mobile. Engage with content. So promote new content that comes out, such as your magazine cover story. So we, at Time, we actually push our magazine cover story every week. Well, at Time it's every other week now, but we push this out every week, and we do magnificent with this. Like, we get a cost per click that is so low. And then, you know, obviously with some issues with social and Facebook right now, but we try to track how many orders we're actually getting from that. And then your news content. This is just something that you want to continue to track. And then target contact promotions based on your interests and affinity, retarget prospects that hit your limit of free articles. Especially, you want to continue to pound those people and bring them back so they do hit the wall and they understand the value. And then, you know, focus on content engagement. Some things you could do too is that if someone actually comes and hits your wall, you can actually trigger them and do more, like with the story they're trying to read. So anything you can do around engagement. The thing that's going to bring them back more and more is the content. And then target the right audience with the right content. Obviously, you know, I can't speak enough about content, but it's really about the experience, the awareness, the content. So you want to enhance that discoverability, pinpoint the most cost-effective audiences. You want to, achieve the top of mind awareness. So deliver content to keep the audience engaged, and then build brand loyalty. You know, and a lot of this can fall into your retention as well. So if someone's falling off from a retention standpoint, you want to use these same tactics to drive retention. This is one of my favorite kind of things. You know, we did this at Gannett a little bit. I don't know if they're still doing it, but we're about to embark on the same kind of test in at Time. So you want to utilize your low, medium, and high usage data and serve acquisition tactics around registration, newsletters, and subscriptions. So I always gave them a name, like Nancy non-engaged, Leon low engaged, Mary medium, and Harry high. So you really want to look at, for instance, if someone is like only reading 1 and 2 articles and they haven't registered yet, you don't want to waste your 1 and 2 articles on just pushing subscription messaging to them. I see this a lot when I'm on a lot of sites. Like, you've just gotten to the site, it's your first or second time there, and people, they're just pounding you with like subscription overlays, subscription growls, but like, you're not ready to subscribe. So really look at your audience. So like someone who's a newsletter subscriber or who's first time visitor to the site or anonymous, you should be A/B testing, giving them like a registration versus a newsletter sign up, or you should test a registration versus a subscription message, or a newsletter versus a subscription message, to really see what actually drives a higher conversion, and then track the path of that to a subscription. You want to utilize those units as much as possible to really see what actually has the best conversion for you and what actually drives the best path for you to gain either an email address, a registration, or a subscription. So you want to get the most out of those units that you have and the user's time on the site. So, you know, you want to do this at each stage, and you can kind of set boundaries around, like someone who reads 0 to 1 articles, is not signed up for a newsletter, is not registered. So you can kind of develop your own segments and figure out what the behavior is and what testing should happen at each point. So this is just kind of an example of what you can do. Nurture users towards subscription. So this is like one of my favorite things. So you should definitely build out customer journeys that target users across the subscription funnel. So driving audience engagement and conversion, but also introducing the brand in general. So you have the top of the funnel, you want to connect, the middle of the funnel, you want to engage, and then the bottom of the funnel is more around subscription. So you want to constantly iterate and optimize the experience, and eventually you can move to a more AI-driven series based on the user behavior and needs. So when I was at Gannett, we did have an AI-driven series of a journey. And what that was is, I'm going to show you a journey that we have at Time, but for our top sites at Gannett, we did have an AI-driven that was more based on behavior. Which was Einstein through Exact Target, which some of you might be familiar with, and it was more based on behavior, and it actually tied to our newsletters, where we were getting about a 30% increase in subscriptions in that journey when it was tied to the newsletters and it was showing the same offer, which I do highly recommend if you can get there. And then, you can pull in content that is for, personalized for each user. And, it ends up being that you have like over 100 templates, and not each user is actually getting the same template, which is really kind of where you want to head, I think, and get to. Drive engagement of prospects, connect with users through newsletter, signups, contest engagement, and then drive overall conversions. So this is the journey that we kind of put together, that is launching at Time, which I'm super excited about. I find it extremely engaging. It just recently launched. This isn't the full journey. There's actually 13 emails. It's really about welcoming our users and helping them to get started. It's really not about driving subscriptions. So anyone who signs up for a newsletter or registers, whichever happens first, gets put into this journey. Email 1 is personalized based on their behavior. You can either register on the site, sign up for a newsletter, or actually register for one of our Time 100 events, which I mentioned earlier. And the first part of it is really about welcoming you to the brand, giving you all insight on like some of our brands like Time 100, Time for Kids, Time for Health. Then we actually go into nurturing you on all the ways to connect with us, Time for Health, all of our newsletters, and then some of our videos. So it drives the videos. There's an introduction to our journalists, and there is an email in the series that does drive you to subscription. And then it goes on and on. There's a discount to the cover store, meet our editor. So this isn't in like the exact order. This is just kind of a sample of what happens. So the idea is to welcome, nurture, subscribe. And eventually we will cross this over through on site and eventually into social, and really try to connect with our users and allow them to really see everything that we offer. I'm a big believer that value really doesn't just come from what you're paying for. Value comes from everything that the brand can actually bring you. And the more that I can bring you, the more you will actually visit us. And the more that you visit us, the more opportunity I have to offer you and retain you. So engagement performance is really understanding your goals. So the goal of strategic audience engagement is to really increase the brand loyalty, which is what I just mentioned, drive user engagement, and really help to develop a habit and that ultimate goal for the user to subscribe. So focus on these key audience engagement KPIs, and really that's going to help you to measure your success. So really traffic and the website visits. I really kind of underline the more important ones. Page views, you really do want to increase those page views. Click-through rate, CPC, but subscription sales at the end of the day. And then post reactions are great to have. Post shares are great to have. And anybody who comments, obviously they're engaged a little bit there too. And then just your path to subscription is really know your audience, create value for your potential subscriber, immerse yourself in the data. So the more data you have, the better off, and really, you know, breaking out more data by the newsletters, registration, how that leads to subscription and what the conversion looks like. And then also retention, how those people are retaining, how it's breaking out from an engagement standpoint around retention. Collaborate with edit, and data is a must. So making sure your edit team understands the data as well, it's extremely important. Invest in audience development, so get them to come. Invest in audience engagement and get them to stay. Know what content converts. That's really important. Knowing what content is converting for each of your user groups. And then test everything. And then share subscription success with the whole organization. The biggest successes I have had is getting really everyone to understand why you're doing something, what works, and how they can contribute and be part of the success. So that is it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori. That's fantastic. I think you've not just given us a path to subscription, but I would actually suggest you've given us a prescription, if you will. You are so knowledgeable in the space and have such great experience. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us. Just a little bit of time for questions. I know we're trying to wrap up for the day, and so it's certainly been a robust day for us. But one of the questions that comes in has been, what types of offers have helped you in the win-backs? Because that's an area that a lot of people are looking at right now.
Yeah. So, you know, it's really funny. We're working on a win-back program at Time right now. And I think win-back needs to be dynamic. So, you know, it's really this difference between magazines and newspapers. And I think a lot of you know this. And, you know, the one thing I have learned being at Time in the magazine world is across any magazine is, and I'm going to date myself here, but the magazine pricing is the same magazine pricing from when I was like in high school. I don't know if you noticed, like you can buy a magazine for the same price that when I was in high school. Everything's like $12 and $18. And that has been a real challenge for me at Time, is really about pricing. And, you know, they still price magazines at a very low price, especially in the print market. So launching digital was really a challenge for me because it's very hard to price digital when print is very low. You know what I mean? So we do have a lot of print people who are paying substantial because Time being a 100-year brand, we have a lot of print people who have been around for 100 years, not 100 years, but like 50 years. So they are paying a lot of money. Like they're not paying $40, $50, they're paying a lot of money. So, but what happens is those people, believe it or not, the way that Time is set up, they go, and I actually have brought Matt in to help us with a lot of this. They go right down to a very low price. So we are actually implementing in the next couple of weeks a dynamic pricing around win-back, where not everybody gets the same price. So what I've implemented is in the first 90 days of win-back, we have a restart period, a win-back period, and then an expire period. So there's 3 different price points. You have a restart period, which is dynamic, is planning to be dynamic off of what the person's currently paying, and then a win-back period, which goes off of what your restart period is, like a percentage off. And then you have your expire period, which is more of a flat rate period. Does that make sense? So the idea is to really capture the bulk of revenue in that 90 days is kind of something that we're trying at Time. In the past, I have seen everybody kind of just goes with a flat rate for, you know, of like, at Gannett, we had more of a flat rate of what we did at Winback. But I mean, I do suggest the dynamic pricing, especially if you've been in the business and pushing digital for a while. You've already worked hard to do those price increases. So I don't think having a flat rate would be a great place to go. I would utilize more of a dynamic pricing, or at least test into a dynamic pricing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that, you know, you worked really hard to get, you know, the entire sort of USA Today network almost as a well-oiled machine. I mean, in fact, it was a machine, right? You had an AI-powered journey.
And then yeah, it was pretty, you know, I owe a lot to that to someone who's on my team at Time right now. She's on the phone. But I have to tell you, it's really funny because when I joined USA Today, our pricing was $9.99 a year. And when I left, I got the pricing up to, people were paying $9. And I remember people used to laugh at us. I remember going to meetings, Matt Lindsay could probably agree, like where people used to be like, you charge $9.99 a year. When I left Gannett, I had people paying $9.99 and $12.99 a month. So we had huge growth over the 3 years in pricing. So, you know, I highly encourage dynamic pricing and really looking at customers, where they live, what they're currently paying you, and not falling back on a one size fits all approach.
Sure. Yeah. And coming from Gannett and into Time, you're still in a situation where you have digital and you have print. So one of the questions that's come in is whether or not you can leverage digital touch points to actually drive the physical version as well for when you're trying to win people back or get them to actually pick up a hard copy of the magazine.
Say that. Can you say your question again? The music came in.
Yeah, no problem. Just recognizing whether or not the digital touch points that you have in your journey, if you can utilize those to leverage how to get people to pick up a copy of the print magazine. And if you guys are thinking about that at all.
So believe it or not, the digital breakout, even online, is still high. A high amount of people take print. People love, I've never, like coming over, we have a very healthy print business. Very healthy. It's probably the highest I've ever seen in the industry. The decline is also a lot lighter than what I've seen in the newspaper business. But I think it's because it's just a different brand, and I think it has a different value, and I think it's also not a daily. It just delivers differently, I think. So it is people love the print magazine. It has a much higher loyalty than what you see in like the newspaper business. Which is very different. And I love the newspaper business. I love local news, like I really do. But it is very different. People still, but I also think that has to do with price a little bit. The price is lower, like, you know what I mean? It's a lower price product. Like the newspaper is a very high price product. Do you know what I mean? So they do switch. It's just very different. So,
and we respect that difference. In fact, it's why we wanted you to come on and talk today in our sort of spotlight, because there's a distinct difference, right, between that and newspaper. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so fortunate to get to see you again, and thankful to the Mather economics team for putting this symposium on so we can, even though it's virtual. Hopefully we'll see each other in person soon. At this point, I wanted to thank you and then actually turn it over to Matt, who's going to give us a wrap up of what we heard today and tee us up for tomorrow.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, and also thank you to the panelists. We've had just phenomenal sessions today. I can't thank you all enough. I've taken copious notes and have a wonderful just wealth of knowledge there. So I do have a few kind of just quick notes on each session. I know we have a few people left, but we're over time. So I just thought I wanted to make sure I hit the high notes. I mean, Tony did a wonderful job talking about their bias towards action and the test and learn process that they have there. Pete focused on the first party data on the audience is critical. I think the recurring themes today were just getting the data and then using the audience content to draw the audience in and engage them. The subscription engine at Media House that Paul Verwilt spoke about is really, I think, a phenomenal tool. Other companies, I think, will be moving that way if they're not already there. The digital transformation that Juan spoke about at Reforma, I think he had the quote of the day where he said, "In God we trust, everybody else must bring data." I think I'll use that in the future. So thank you, Juan. And then Lori talking about the story at Time. I think it's fascinating to look at having someone come from the newspaper industry and then work in a magazine, and to be able to compare those two worlds. I think it is really phenomenal. And I've learned a lot working with her in the little bit of time we've been together at Time. So I know I have far more I could share, but I know you've been through this with me all day today. I know you've been a wonderful audience, and I'm really impressed how many people are still here with us. So thank you all. We'll see you again tomorrow. And again, thanks to the wonderful speakers and to Nikki in particular. So take care, everybody. Have a great night.